Know your own mind, live your own life. You have a great potential for success, but first you must know your own mind and live your own life, then you will find and enjoy that mighty potential. Become acquainted with your inner self and you can win what you want within a time limit of your own choosing. Certain special techniques help you win the goals of your dearest dreams, and every one of these techniques is easily within your power. Somewhere along the path of life, every successful man finds out how to live his own life as he wishes to live it. The younger you are when you discover this mighty power, the more likely you are to live successfully and happily. Yet even in later years, many make the great change from letting others make them what they are, to making sure that they make their lives to their own liking. The Creator gave man the prerogative of power over his own mind. It must have been the Creator's purpose to encourage man to live his own life, think his own thoughts, find his own goals and achieve them. Simply by exercising this profound prerogative you can bring abundance into your life, and with it know the greatest wealth of all, peace of mind, without which there can be no real happiness. You live in a world filled with outside influences which impinge upon you. You are influenced by other people's acts and wishes, by law and custom, by your duties and your responsibilities. Everything you do has some effect upon others, as do their actions upon you. And yet you must find out how to live your own life, use your own mind, go on toward the dream you wish to make real and solid. Know thyself, said the ancient Greek philosophers, and this remains key advice for the man who would be in all ways wealthy. Without knowing yourself and being yourself, you cannot truly use the own great secret which gives you power to mold your future and make life carry you the way you want to go. Let us then take off on our trip to Happy Valley. Do not think of me as a backseat driver. Rather, you are at wheel and I merely call your attention to a trustworthy roadmap whereon the main highway is marked beyond question. On your journey to riches and peace of mind, the road grows smoother and straighter as you travel. Never believe you don't have what it takes. Probably you are reading under an electric light. You know that Thomas A. Edison gave the first practical electric light to the world. But did you know that Edison was thrown out of school in the early grades after his teacher decided he had an addled mind and could not take schooling? This then was the impact of another person's opinion upon Thomas Edison to let him know with the voice of authority that he didn't have what it takes to absorb even a primary education. Where would he have been if he had allowed this directive to take charge of his thinking? Fortunately for him and fortunately for the world, Edison decided to live his own life. Through early adversity, Edison discovered something he might never have learned through formal schooling. He learned, first, that he had a mind he could control and direct toward any desired end. Then he learned he could use the technical training of other men and successfully direct scientific research even though he himself never had been schooled in any of the sciences. When he took full possession of that addled mind, it produced not only the incandescent lamp but also one great discovery after another. A boy finds a friend and finds himself. I too was nearly doomed by a false label of unworthiness. I was then 9 years old. My mother had died a year before, and I lived with relatives. To them and to my own father I was a problem child who never would accomplish anything save, perhaps, what a life of crime can accomplish. That I was doing my best to live up to my reputation as the successor of Jesse James. I even had a six-shooter which I had learned to handle like an expert. Then a certain woman came upon the scene and she changed my life. That woman was my stepmother. Long before she arrived I had been thoroughly conditioned by my relatives to hate her. I found this very easy to do. She arrived, and my father brought her to our house where the relatives had gathered to meet her. He introduced her all around. At length he found me, where I stood in a coma doing my very best to look tough. And here, said my father, is your stepson, Napoleon, beyond doubt the meanest boy in Wise County. We don't expect much good from him. I wouldn't be surprised if Hester's throwing rocks at you by tomorrow morning. At that moment, I believe my life hung in the balance. It was a wise and wonderful woman who placed her hand under my stubborn chin and raised my head so that she could look me squarely in the eyes. She said only a few words, but they lifted me onto an entirely new level. Turning to my father, my stepmother said, "You are wrong about this boy. He is not the meanest boy in Wise County or anywhere else. He is a very alert and intelligent boy, and all he needs is some worthy objective toward which to direct his very good mind." That was the first time in my life that anyone had said anything good about me. I straightened up, threw out my chest and grinned. Then and there I sensed that woman, who had come to take my mother's place as my relatives referred to her, was one of those rare people who can help others find Thebes that is in them. That was the end of my six-shooter days. Increasingly finding myself as I grew older, I discovered my talent for writing. My stepmother helped me master the typewriter. With the aid of the typewriter I became a writer for newspapers. Through that experience I qualified to interview successful men, and thus I came to sit down with Andrew Carnegie. Out of that interview, which ran on through the better part of 3 days and nights, came my commitment to search out the secret of successful achievement, not merely as a matter of words, but as a pattern of definite action in the lives of men who have achieved great wealth. Out of this grew the organization of the science of personal achievement, which has reverberated around the world, bringing prosperity and peace of mind to millions of men and women. Great artists also live their own lives, or they could not be great. One of the great opera stars of all time, Madame Schumann-Heink, as a young girl went to a music teacher to have her voice tested. He listened a few minutes, then said brusquely, "That's enough. Go back to your sewing machine, you may become a first-class seamstress." A singer, no. Remember, that was the voice of authority speaking. The girl could have been forgiven for deciding then and there that she would never sing again. Yet she had and kept possession of her own mind. She became all the more determined that she would learn to sing and to sing well. This she did, and the world became richer. So it has been with many another case in which great personal talent might have been lost forever if the possessor of that talent had not felt it, even when the experts said it was not there. Adversity. It's a tonic, not a stumbling block. Every adversity carries the seed of an equal or greater benefit. Very few march straight to success without going through periods of temporary failure and discouragement. Yet when you are in possession of your inner self, there is no such thing as a knockout blow. You may be knocked down, but you can bounce right back. You may detour on rough roads, but you always can find your way back to the paved highway. You may think this applies only to simple matters. Think, then, of the infinitely complex matter of winning the independence of a colonial territory, and not only that, but of focusing the many scattered influences which make sure you become the country's first president. In 1910 I became the personal counselor of Manuel L. Quezon. I not only counseled him politically but, perhaps more importantly, I taught him the science of personal achievement, which then was quite new. Senor Quezon was the first president of the Philippine Islands when they gained their freedom. In 1910, however, that time was far in the future. The goal of freeing his people possessed Quezon's mind, and he saw himself as the first president of the new nation. I assured him he could realize both ambitions, yet we knew that such great events do not come to pass overnight. There is a well-recognized power in setting up a definite goal. Few, however, realize the power of setting a realistic time limit in which one intends to attain that goal. After having counseled Senor Quezon for some years, I induced him to set out a finite time limit for freeing the Philippines and becoming the new nation's leader. I also prepared an affirmation which he repeated to himself daily. It closed with a statement of this nature: "I will allow no person's opinion, no influence to enter my mind which does not harmonize with my purpose." Both the time limit and the affirmation were of great help to Quezon in knowing his own mind and keeping his own direction in the face of the enormous difficulties which beset him. 24 years and 6 months from the day Quezon began to use the science of personal achievement, he became the first president of the Free Philippine Islands. Coincidence? Coincidence despite a world war which intervened and many other factors which were not foreseeable? I do not think it was a coincidence, for I have seen this principle of personal achievement work for so many people in so many different situations that coincidence must be ruled out. That we shall touch upon the principle again. Right now I shall tell you about just one man, presently doing business in Chicago, who has used it with notable success. W. Clement Stone was in high school when he discovered his own goals, his own direction in which the powers of his own mind would take him. Soon he was selling insurance at such a rate that he made more money than his teachers. Today his fortune is estimated at more than $160 million and it is increasing rapidly. In 1939, however, he faced disaster. At that time he was the head of an agency, representing a big casualty company, which sold a special accident and health policy. One day the parent company pulled the string and terminated his contract with 2 weeks' notice to Mr. Stone did not have large reserves. It was imperative to keep that contract going. He spent 45 minutes in refreshing his contact with his inner self, then he decided that within those critical 2 weeks he would persuade the casualty company it was against their own best interest to terminate his contract. The company had very cogent reasons for ending the contract. Nevertheless, they did change their minds. Ash wished them to, and Stone kept on marching toward his fortune. That he then decided that by 1956 he would own his own big health and accident insurance company. By 1956 he decided that by 1956 he would have $10 million off his own. He did that. I heard recently that Mr. Stone has set up a lifetime goal of $600 million. I do not know his deadline date, but I have no doubt that on or before that date he will have the stated sum, and further, that he will use a good part of it as he always has used his money to benefit mankind. The concept of $600 million may frighten a man who thinks small, but a man who knows the secrets of personal achievement merely says, why not? A little while ago I made a survey for the purpose of learning who were the 10 men who had made the most outstanding application of the science of personal achievement in the United States. Clement Stone was third from the top of the list. The other two were Andrew Carnegie, the sponsor of my 20 years of research, and Thomas Alva Edison, the greatest inventor of all time. That I met Mr. Stone for the first time in 1953. It was then that I began to unravel the dramatic story of his rise to fame and fortune, starting in business for himself with only $100 in cash and a copy of my most popular book, Think and Grow Rich. I was so intrigued by the effective application Stone had made of my success philosophy that I accepted his offer to help him take the science of personal achievement to his entire insurance personnel. The task covered 10 years during which I devoted all of my time to helping Mr. Stone indoctrinate his entire organization with my success philosophy. It was a tremendous job, but it paid off in terms which proved conclusively that my 20 years of research under the direction of Andrew Carnegie had uncovered a miraculous formula for helping people to get from where they were to where they wished to be in life. When I first began my association with Mr. Stone, many OFI's top executives frowned upon the alliance as being a waste of time. They had never heard of a success philosophy based upon what 500 outstanding men had learned from a lifetime of experience through the trial and error method, and they were naturally suspicious of it. 5 years later these same executives met with Mr. Stone and myself in a business conference. To my great surprise Mr. Stone arose and addressed himself to the group. "Gentlemen," said he, "the combined insurance company of America is no performing miracles." Then a long pause, after which he said, "The company was performing no miracles before Napoleon Hill came here." When I began my association with Mr. Stone the annual premium income from policy holders was around $24 million, and Mr. Stone's personal fortune was estimated to be around $3 million. When the association was discontinued by mutual consent 10 years later, the annual premium income of the company was around $84 million and Mr. Stone's personal fortune was estimated to be more than $160 million. How much did I get from the association? You may wish to ask. The cash I received was negligible in comparison with that which Mr. Stone received, but I was not working for monetary reward. I was after something far greater than that which could have been gained by any amount of money, for I had proved during those 10 years of association with Mr. Stone that the science of personal achievement could perform miracles for those who embraced it and made intelligent application of it. More important still, I had laid the foundation for the Napoleon Hill Academy, which is now organizing and conducting franchise schools for the teaching of the science of personal achievement throughout the United States and eventually will reach throughout the free world. The far-flung significance of these schools may be brought into understandable focus by the fact that the science of personal achievement has turned out to be a perfect antidote for communism, something I had not anticipated when I began the organization of the philosophy in 1908. Which reminds me that, truly, man proposes but God disposes. It may well be that the science of personal achievement will become a strong factor in neutralizing the cancerous evil known as communism, which now threatens the liberty of all mankind. The science of personal achievement is already under option to a group of men who are having it translated into Spanish for the purpose of taking it to the people of all Spanish-speaking countries, starting with our Latin American friends of the South. I plan eventually to have the philosophy translated into all the major languages of the world. So, who is wise enough to say what I got from my 10 years off association with W. Clement Stone, or wise enough to understand the hand of fate which brought the two of us together, the dramatic story of Arnold Reed. Arnold Reed is another insurance executive whose life story and its relation to the science of personal achievement parallels that of W. Clement Stone. In many respects his story, as it related to the success philosophy, is more dramatic than the Stone story. Mr. Reed was a top-ranking life insurance salesman, with a record of sales production seldom equaled by anyone in this field. Mr. Reed's sales started at around $1 million annually and pyramided upward far beyond this amount. He was associated with an insurance company headed by a man whom he regarded as his personal friend, unfortunately, or was it? Arnold had not read carefully the fine print of his contract with the company, for he learned later that it contained a clause which deprived him of his renewal premium commissions, the one factor in the insurance salesman's work which gives him his greatest incentive to do a good job. This discovery shocked Arnold so severely that he went home and went to bed, refusing to eat or to communicate with his friends. Doctors were called in to diagnose his ailment, but not one of them could find anything wrong with him physically. It was not his body that was sick, it was his soul, for the shock he had experienced through the perfidy of his friend had cut the line of communication between him and the source of inspiration which had made him a great life insurance salesman, that source which alone can make men truly great. Slowly but surely Arnold Reed was dying. His ailment was one that no doctor could cure. The doctors who had attended him knew this and frankly admitted they could offer no hope. Then a miracle happened. A friend of Arnold's, who had long been a student of my success philosophy, visited Arnold and presented him with Think and Grow Rich. "Here is a book," he told Arnold, "which has worked wonders for me and I want you to read it." Arnold took the book, threw it on the bed beside him and turned away without comment. Hours later he picked up the book, opened it and, lo! Something in it caught his eye and he read it through. Then he read it again, and on the third time around he felt the surge of a power which he readily recognized as one which could bring him out of the dungeon of despair into which he had fallen. He got out of bed and began to write letters to his friends who knew of his record as a life insurance salesman, offering them an opportunity to join with him in organizing a life insurance company under the name of Great Commonwealth Life Insurance Company. The friends responded quickly and generously. The amount of money needed was oversubscribed and much of it had to be returned to the senders. All of this took place at about the time I was beginning my alliance with W. Clement Stone. Now, some 12 years later, the Great Commonwealth Life Insurance Company is one of the most successful in its field, with a gross premium income of over $9 million in 1966 and rapidly increasing toward the new goal which Arnold Reed has set at $1 billion annually. The company is operating in a major portion of the United States and it has a sales organization of over 400 dedicated men and women who have tuned in and drawn upon that mysterious power that brought Arnold Reed out of the shadows of death, and they are doing a job that is without parallel in the insurance industry. The Great Commonwealth Life Insurance Company conducts schools in many parts of the country in which new recruits to its sales force are trained. The first thing each trainee receives is a copy of Think and Grow Rich and a briefing on what this book has done for Arnold Reed and the company. The last time I spoke to the sales organization of the Great Commonwealth, Arnold Reed marched onto the platform holding me by the arm. He held up a copy of Think and Grow Rich as he said, "My friends, if it had not been for this book and my dear friend here on my left, there would have been no Great Commonwealth Life Insurance Company and I would now be 6 feet under the ground." It was the shortest and the most dramatic introduction I had ever experienced, and it filled me so deeply with emotion that I could hardly begin my speech. Arnold Reed is a truly great leader of men, as evidenced by the phenomenal record he has established with Great Commonwealth. The main secret of his leadership is his belief in what he is doing and his sincerity in his relationship with his associates, two qualities without which no man may become a great leader at any level of life. A success-conscious mind functions rapidly and effectively. In my hundreds of interviews with men who had made fortunes, I noticed how well their minds were focused on success. Some of these men were well educated. Some, for example Henry Ford, were notably uninformed in some areas of school learning. It never was the formal education or the lack of it which gave these men the power to use their minds with such drive and effect, nor was it unusual intelligence. What was it, then, which impelled their minds to seize upon great goals, then winnow all the circumstances of life and make use of what could help them achieve their ambitions. It was success consciousness. First you must know your own mind, then you find success consciousness. When Henry Ford mastered the art of making a good, inexpensive automobile, he still went on using his success consciousness. He had to make sure his cars were well distributed and their sale pushed in every part of the country. For this he needed capital. The bankers had capital to lend, Booth did not want outside financial interests to take hold of his company. Ford's truly efficient mind showed him the way to get the capital he needed even while he built up his distributing organization. First, he allotted his entire output of automobiles on Lido distributors who held the Ford franchise. Then he made it clear that each distributor must accept a fixed quota of cars, advancing in cash a percentage of the purchase price before the cars were delivered. This plan made every distributor practically a partner in the Ford business, yet it did not affect Mr. Ford's control of the business. Again, without affecting his control, it provided him with the necessary operating capital. Moreover, it provided his dealers with a very definite incentive toward finding abouir for every car, actually the same incentive they would have had if they had been operating their own independent businesses. I have heard it said that this plan worked a hardship on some of the Ford distributors. Having known some dealers since before the Model T car, however, and having looked at today's record, I can say that most Ford dealers are noteworthy for their success. 2 Bicycle mechanics, Orville and Wilbur Wright, gave the world its first successful airplane. What kept their minds clicking, caused them first to build the world's first wind tunnel, caused them to find a secret of wingtip control which nobody else had thought of? What caused them to surmount limitations of material and of power which still make that first flight look impossible? First they took control of their own minds and their own lives, then they were guided by the success consciousness which always follows. Is today's world different? Only in some details. Take such a device as a memory core, a tiny magnetic gadget which operates by the thousands in many modem computers. The Wright brothers did not know of such things, nor did Henry Ford or Andrew Carnegie or Thomas Edison. A young man named Merlin Michelson, in 1955, looked at the rapidly dawning computer age and saw what every age offers: a need and a way to fill it. He started to manufacture memory cores in his basement. His first investment in tools and supplies came to $7.21. His first employees were friends and neighboring housewives who pitched in. Today, not yet 40, Mr. Michelson still makes memory cores. He is president and 75% owner of a $16 million-year company, and the company stock he holds is worth about $47 million. Can success consciousness be instilled into a mind already filled with a record of failure? When you come to know your own mind and live your own life, you can wipe out a record of failure just as surely as you can erase the message on a tape recorder, leaving a wonderfully receptive tapeworm to receive new and better impressions. Some people have been able to do this for themselves, others need help. I well remember a man I helped to find himself. As you will see, I got him started, and once he knew where he was going, he did the rest. This was a dead broke man just out of the army. I believe he used the army as a refuge, but eventually he was back in civilian clothes, looking for a job. The mere mention of hard times seemed to be enough to flatten him. He was shabby. He was hungry. He was willing to settle for crumbs if only he could get them. He came to see me about finding work. At the outset he announced, "All I want is a place to sleep and enough to eat." A place to sleep and enough to eat in a world that throbs with riches. Something prompted me to ask, why settle for a meal ticket? How would you like to become a millionaire? He looked at me with glassy eyes, swaying. Please don't joke with me. I assure you I'm serious. Every man has some kind of assets, and every man can turn his assets into $1 million or many millions if he uses them correctly. He sighed. What do you mean by assets? I have a nickel in me pocket. Bring your mind around to the positive side, I said, and you have the most important asset you'll ever have. We'll work on that. Now let's take inventory of your skills. Sit down, we'll talk better. What did you do in the army? He had been a cook. Before going into the army he had been a Fuller brush salesman. He was a good cook, I discovered, but obviously he had not been a good salesman. Still, Heck knew something about selling, and in talking to him, I discovered he still wanted to sell. At the outset, however, he had no belief he ever could become a good salesman. The memory of past failures inhibited him, and I had to help him break those self-inflicted mental blocks and see, not what he had been, but what he could be. That we talked for some time, and meanwhile my own mind was busily at work. My mind was not weakened by hunger and hopelessness. There had been a time when my mind had known as much despair as did his, but now I was filled with success consciousness, questing about. My uninhibited mind remembered that special new kinds of cookware were now being developed. A new kind of cookware of great benefit to the housewife, a man who could think about cooking and even demonstrate, a man who could be made into a good salesman, and there we had the winning combination. Suppose you represented a company that makes a new kind of aluminum cookware, I said. This cookware offers many advantages. It should be seen in action, then it will practically sell itself. Any housewife, for a small consideration, say, some free pots or pans for her own use, should be glad to invite her neighbors in for a home-cooked dinner. You cook that dinner with the special cookware, and after dinner you take orders for complete, matched sets. If 20 ladies are present, I'm sure you could induce half of them to purchase. Some of these would be eager to run similar dinner parties in their own homes. The business would become self-perpetuating. Sounds okay, my young soldier friend replied. But where am I going to sleep meanwhile? And where am I going to eat, and where am I going to get a few clean shirts and a new suit, not to mention the question of where I am going to get some money or credit to get started on? Such questions are typical of the mind which does not yet know itself, and so sums up all the obstacles rather than looking directly at the goal. Get yourself into the right frame of mind, I said, and you will either find what you need or find a way to do without and still achieve your goal. When your mind can truly picture a desired goal, and feel success consciousness driving it toward that goal, you can win that goal. Let us put aside all other matters and investigate your state of mind. Actually, the young man was very close to having the desired positive state of mind. I waited till I was sure he had it, however. Then I said he was a good risk, and I gave him the use of our guest room, and his meals. I let him use my charge account at Marshall Field so that he could be well dressed. I guaranteed his note for his first outfit of cookware. During his first week he cleared nearly $100 in profit. The second week he doubled that amount. In a little while he began to train other men and women, whom he managed. Most of all, he instilled in them the success consciousness which now had full hold of his mind, and as they prospered, so did he. At the end of 4 years, the young man who had been so hungry and broken-spirited, so very far from being a millionaire, was worth more than $4 million. Moreover, his newly keen and efficient mind had perfected a home demonstration selling plan which now nets millions of dollars annually to a large corps of salespeople, when the bells of heaven ring with joy. When a man finds his own mind and fills it with successful consciousness, or when another man helps him do so, I fancy that the bells of heaven ring with joy. Here is one more soul who has broken the chains forged by his fearful imagination. Now you can see why I chose to begin this book by revealing what it means to take possession of your own mind, live your own life, find your real self that has no limitations. When you do this you have an asset worth whatever values you choose to make it worth. Think again of what is involved in creating an independent nation. Think of ancient India with its teeming millions, under British rule for generation after generation. Think of the Mahatma Gandhi, a man who had no money, controlled normie, did not own a house, did not even own a pair of pants, yet he had an asset which was greater than all the might of the British Empire: the capacity to take possession of his own mind and direct it toward purposes of his own choosing. He chose to free India, and he lived to see the achievement of his purpose. Thanks to the influence of Mahatma Gandhi, my science of personal achievement now has many millions of followers in India. Whether your goal is money, the well-being of others, or a combination of these as well, it may be, know that there is nothing beyond the power of a mind that knows itself and believes in its own capabilities, the spiritual defenses within the castle of your mind. I have purposely used the word defenses in order to call your attention to its varying meanings. A mind that is on the defensive is not an open mind. It is more likely to be a frightened mind, full of excuses and evasions, and hardly capable of lifting its possessor's eyes to the far horizons of accomplishment. In speaking of spiritual defenses, then, I speak of nothing that is negative, rather I speak of certain areas within which one may withdraw and thus become more Completion's self. Every successful person I have known has surrounded himself with these spiritual defenses in one way or another. I adopted the system, and have found it invaluable. Here is how it works. Consider your mind to be laid out in the pattern of some medieval castles. At the center there is a tower, or keep, which is impregnable as it can be made. Going outward from the keep you would come to a wall not so formidable, and again going outward you would come to another wall which serves as the first line of defense that a person approaching the castle first would have to pass the outer wall. This wall of spiritual defense in your mind need not be very high. Anyone who has a legitimate excuse for entering your mind with his ideas can climb this wall. If he does not have a legitimate excuse, however, the wall discourages him. When you set up such a wall, others come to know it there and you give yourself a valuable protection that a person who passes the first line of defense now confronts the second line which you may set up on certain occasions and not on others. When your mind sets up this wall, nobody may climb it unless that person has something strongly in common with you, or something importantly beneficial to share with you at that moment. The inmost castle of protection is the most important of all. It is small, barely big enough to surround you, but when your mind retreats within that keep it is removed from every outside influence. With me, only the Creator can penetrate my inmost spiritual castle. Find yours and you find a source of great strength. Here is where you can find your inmost thoughts, undisturbed by outside influences, and until you find this castle you never can know them. Here is where you can search all the values of a problem and find a solution which otherwise you might not see. Here, especially, is where your fully possessed mind reveals what can be done, and when you come out of your retreat you know that it will be done and that you will do it. At first you may find it necessary to retreat physically from the world into a quiet room or perhaps to some place distant from your business and from people who know you. This often is a good idea even when you have practice in finding the most privacy of your mind, because there are many physical circumstances which break into thought. When you have several times retreated to your thick-walled keep, however, you will find you can enter it for a few seconds in the midst of others who are talking all around you. I have seen many successful men do this, and thus illustrate some of the power to which they owe their success. It is a great renewal of the spirit, a kind of recharge of ability and self-confidence and abiding faith. All that I have to say in this book is keyed to one supreme secret. This secret has been strongly sketched in throughout this chapter. You have seen it, and already it is beginning to penetrate your subconscious mind which never forgets. Checking on Chapter 1, never believe you don't have what it takes. A man who succeeds in life must know where he is going, must fully possess his own mind and believe with full faith that this is it. Knowing this, he can shunt aside any outside influences which may attempt to discourage him. Even the voice of authority, speaking to a child, cannot prevail against a mind that knows itself. Even a child who is a potential criminal can be directed toward an honest and successful life when you show him his own vast potential for making good. Adversity. It's a tonic, not a stumbling block. Life often brings hardship and discouragement, but a mind that knows itself becomes filled with success consciousness that never is lost. You can help yourself by setting up a time limit within which you will achieve great goals. Even an unforeseeable world war did not prove a great enough obstacle to prevail against this mighty personal achievement technique. A success-conscious mind functions rapidly and effectively. Once you fill your mind with your self-directed success consciousness, you achieve a level of mind efficiency which does not depend on formal education. Seeing your preferred goal ahead of you, you are magnificently able to find ways to get what you want. For a pioneer of the automobile age or a pioneer in the construction of modern computer parts, the principle which makes your mind work rapidly and effectively is always the same. Can success consciousness be instilled into another's mind? Even the most discouraged and beaten man can have all his success potential revived when another mind, full of success consciousness, evokes the same great power in his. Belief in success, not in obstacles to success, can spread from one mind to another until millions share the same great goal. The spiritual defenses within the castle of your mind. Within your own mind you can set up 3 spiritual walls which are stronger than stone. Within these walls your mind can know itself and be itself and still absorb all the good, constructive influences you wish to bring in. You will be proof against unwanted negative influences, time wasting, and the like. Within your innermost wall you will always have the means to renew your spirit, recharge your confidence and faith. 2. Close the door on your past. Whenever you meet a misfortune, put it into your past. Keep your mind upon future achievement, and you will find that mistakes of the past often work to fill the future with good fortune. Your wealth and your peace of mind are strongly connected with each other. Even at the lowest level jobs, your success waits within your own mind. Add value to your work and you set in motion the forces that make the concepts of your mind turn into the realities of living. When I was still a poor youth in Wise County, Virginia, I invested 25 cents in a raffle ticket. The prize was a horse and I won. A horse was of considerable value to a farming family in those days, and this one, all agreed, was a good horse. Filled with pride, I led him home. How fortunate I was, or was I? Having installed my horse carefully in the stable, I treated him to oats, calm and hay, all he could eat. That same night he broke out of the stable, went down to the river and drank his fill of water. As anyone who knows horses could have predicted, the poor bloated animal foundered and died. It cost me $5 to have him hauled away and buried. Sommick for my good luck, yet who can tell the uses of the past? I was able in later years to look back upon that incident and see I had been fortunate. You see, I never again have been tempted to risk money in any kind of gambling. Surely I have saved the cost of many horses, let alone saved my peace of mind. Now let me tell you of a more serious incident which cost Amon's life, threatened my own life, prevented me from taking advantage of a great opportunity, seemed like an unmitigated disaster and yet turned out to be for my boundless good and the good of others as well. At that time I had completed the first draft of the Science of Personal Achievement, in 8 volumes, and I needed a publisher. Mr. Don R. Mellett, publisher of the Canton, Ohio Daily News, became my partner and business manager. Windus Judge Elbert H. Gary, chairman of the board of the United States Steel Corporation, to supply the money necessary to print the first edition. Furthermore, Judge Gary agreed to purchase a complete set of the books for every key man employed in that vast corporation. The contract had not yet been signed, but I was on top of the world. Now, Mr. Mellett had been using his newspaper as a means to expose a very unholy alliance between the bootleggers and the police force of his city. 3 days before we were to meet Judge Gary, a member of the police force and a gangster shot and killed Don Mellett. Because I had been associated with him, the gang believed I too had had something to do with their exposure. I missed assassination by only a few hours. For a year I had to hide. At length the murderers were caught, convicted and given lifetime sentences in prison. Meanwhile Judge Gary had died. All my plans were upset. He had had to waste much precious time while in hiding, and I had no publisher. I was right back where I had started, or rather, I was behind where I had been. That I made a new start and found a publisher for my writings. That is a story in itself, but it is not the point of this story. That I found out later that if Judge Gary had become my financial backer, and if the Science of Personal Achievement had been distributed within the United States Steel Corporation as had been planned, I would forever after have been looked upon as a tool of big business. The Science of Personal Achievement would have been greeted with suspicion, would have been turned down cold by many of those whom it now serves. Furthermore, I might have been inhibited against making statements I have made from time to time against big business when it forgets its real purpose, which is to build a better world for mankind. Every adversity has within it the seed of an equivalent or a greater benefit. Can you remember that? Write it on a card, carry the card in your pocket and read it daily. In that phrase lies the key to many a man's peace of mind. It is not the supreme secret to which I have referred, but it lives on the same street. Set it firmly into your consciousness. Every adversity has within it the seed of an equivalent or a greater benefit. Thus it is possible, and strongly advisable, to close the doors to your past insofar as any regrets or bitterness or postmortems are concerned. You are searching for wealth and peace of mind. Neither the way to wealth nor the way to peace of mind leads through the graveyard of unpleasant experiences long past. When you have attained peace of mind, your mind will automatically reject every thought and every mental reaction which is not beneficial to your welfare. Meanwhile, help yourself attain this great command of mind and all it can do for you. Avoid all negative mental influences and especially avoid that shadow of mournful regret which can keep all the sunshine out of your life and keep out other gold as well. Time is the great magician. Close the door on ugly experiences, disappointments and frustrations. Then the great magician, time, can transmute past sorrows and mistakes into present rewards, success and happiness. Knut Hamsun, a Norwegian immigrant, failed at everything tried in this country. In desperation he decided to write the story of his struggles. His book, which he called Hunger, won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Hamsun's terrible experiences at length had made him a rich and famous man. Harry S. Truman failed as a haberdasher. If, from then on, he had considered himself a failure, he certainly could not have entered upon the road to the presidency. That we have also the example of another man who took up storekeeping, but the store failed. That he took up engineering and also failed. The sheriff sold his surveying instruments to pay his debts. That he joined a group of soldiers in an Indian war and had the rank of captain. His record as a soldier was so poor that he was reduced to the rank of private and sent home. That he was passionately in love and engaged to be married. The girl died and left him in a terrible state of shock. That he took up law. He won few cases. That he went into politics, ran for office and was defeated. That is it astonishing that Abraham Lincoln eventually became president? In a way it is, and in a way it is not. He might have allowed his mind to drag failure and discouragement after him, as a prisoner drags his chains. After all, so many people don't. They are indeed prisoners of the past, never able to break free of the image of failure which, to them, means me. He did not do this, however. The way in which he determinedly left failure behind him was no miracle. It is a grand privilege available to every human being. The man who became president had been tempered in the fires of life, or he could not have been what he was nor have done what he did. You cannot see all of the great plan of your life. You can make it full and rewarding, however, if you treat each sorrow and setback as a tempering toward greater and richer experiences to come. Let me suggest, keep yourself aware of life's endless combinations of circumstances. Have you been disappointed in love? Your heart feels literally broken. You can see no joy in the world. You may wish to take an overdose of sleeping pills and end it all. Yet is it likely that nowhere in the world exists the woman, or man, who can take the place of the one you lost? A moment of thought within the citadel of your deepest mind will show you this is hardly possible. So it happened with me, for after a dreadful disappointment of the heart I met a combination of circumstances which led at last to the perfect wife. There is a more poignant point to the story. When, after a violent lover's quarrel, my first sweetheart turned away from me, married another man, I thought the world had ended. 5 years later the man she married committed suicide, unbalanced by the constant friction of living with the woman I had been so anxious to marry. Where would I have been with the terror of a woman who heckled me instead of helping me? Every adversity has within it the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. Remember that even a condition which the world calls handicap you can call benefit and make it truly so. I have mentioned that Thomas A. Edison had little formal schooling. W. Clement Stone, the highly successful insurance man, was a high school dropout. So many men have succeeded despite the lack of book learning that, without in the least downgrading education, we may say the lack of it need not be a handicap. It depends on the man, but what of Edison's deafness? Surely a very marginal ability to hear is a handicap. But again it depends on the man. Edison as a boy had been a candy butcher on trains. Once a man lifted him and his entire load of candy onto a train by his ears, and that was the beginning of the end of his hearing. He could have dwelt all his life on this cruel and damaging experience. Like many another, he could have put his major energies into bewailing his fate, but he didn't. When I visited him, he was dependent upon a hearing aid, a primitive thing by today's standards. When I was sure we understood each other's minds, I asked him if he had not found his deafness a great handicap. He replied, to the contrary, deafness has been a great help to me. It has saved me from having to listen to a lot of worthless chatter, and it has taught me to hear from within. Anyone who wants peace of mind should remember those last 3 words. By transmuting his affliction into a benefit, Mr. Edison learned how to tune in on all the subtle power which waits within every mind. He felt, too, that he heard from within, the voice of an infinite intelligence, and received guidance from an infallible source. Every adversity has within it the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. When you speak of failure, you attract failure. When you speak of success, you attract success. I once made a survey of more than 30,000 men and women to ascertain their staying qualities in the face of failure and defeat. for the majority of those people it took only one setback to wed them to defeat. Of those who kept on aspiring, another large percentage got started in various projects but quit even before meeting with defeat. The defeat came not from circumstances but from feeble-tin attitude of defeat which they carried from the past. Instead of closing the door on the past, they ran back through that door at every opportunity. Needless to say, there were no Fords or Edisons in this group. On the other hand, I am reminded of a man named Arthur Decio who built his career out of a family failure that had cost all of his father's savings. It was a business in mobile homes which never got going. Now the father handed it to the son, hopelessly. What could Decio, then in his 20s, do with the business? Most men would have liquidated it on the spot. Starting in his garage next to the railroad tracks in Elkhart, Indiana, Mr. Decio first designed a small, easily transportable mobile home which research had shown him was needed. Later he applied General Motors' methods in a business which never had known them before. He introduced frequent model changes. He built a network of dealers. He brought out 4 lines of mobile homes, each competing with the others. His company's sales in 4 years have increased 500%, and Mr. Decio has made $5 million out of the business that was about to fail. Today's population includes a large proportion of young marrieds and retired couples, both groups being prime customers for mobile homes. Of course Mr. Decio realizes this, for every age has its special ways. The many failures who turned up in my survey of some years ago displayed a failure quality which belongs to any age. Not only had these people failed, but they kept on living with their failure. They spoke of it in preference to other topics. They lived in the past tense, reliving the pain of what had been. Those who had succeeded, however, spoke in the future tense. Their eyes were not upon their past, which often contained a good share of mistakes, but ever upon the future, upon their great objectives. This too was the invariable case with those 500 and more vastly successful men whom I interviewed at the behest of Andrew Carnegie. On their way up they talked, the way up. Where failure had been laid behind, failure stayed behind, and notably it stayed out. Off-tier conversation, concerning success and failure, I have observed another trait which has much to do with peace of mind. That it is obvious that those who are filled with malice and envy do not have peace of mind. Their malice and envy sour their lives. Failure so often hates the very sight of success. Speaking with successful men, I have noticed they speak in complimentary terms of other men who are succeeding. Their attitude isn't one of envy, but of willingness to learn from others. The failure, on the other hand, goes out of his way to find some adverse criticism of the successful person. If he can't find anything doubtful about the way that person does business, then he'll pick at some other area. His malice is evident, and so is the sad fact that he not only cannot command what money can buy, but also he cannot attain peace of mind. Is there a definite connection between being wealthy and having peace of mind? There is a connection, but it is not absolute. There certainly are poor people who have peace of mind, but they are far more rare than folklore would have us believe. You need not be a millionaire, but without sufficient money you are cut off from much in life that sustains the spirit. If you are continually worrying about where your next meal is to come from, when you'll be able to get your shoes repaired, how you are going to pay your dentist bill, how many more years your house can go without paint, you have no peace of mind. If your lack of funds forces you to live in a shabby neighborhood so that you constantly worry about the influence upon your children, you have no peace of mind. If you cannot occasionally buy and cherish something that is beautiful, if you cannot afford a vacation you really enjoy, if you cannot partake of a motion picture or a stage show which you know is very much worthwhile, your mind does not have the chance to satisfy itself. Money brings much good into your life and much that nobody should have to do without. It is no surprise that there are many rich people who enjoy peace of mind. But there are many who do not. If the main purpose of a fortune is to make its possessor worry about keeping his fortune, peace of mind goes out the window. One of the failures which have illuminated my knowledge and strengthened my soul came when I was quite wealthy. I simply became poor, quite poor. The circumstances are revealing. Perhaps as a compensation for the dirt poor days of my youth, I became enamored of big houses, big cars, lush acreage and similar symbols of wealth. Perhaps I was merely in line with my times, which seemed to demand that when a man had money, he had to display it. Today's millionaires are much less ostentatious. At any rate, my books were selling well. I had made a name as a trainer of salesmen, other enterprises prospered, and so it seemed imperative that I must drive a Rolls-Royce. Soon I had a pair of Rolls-Royces. Soon after this, I cradled my cars in a big garage on a large estate in the Catskill Mountains, north of New York City. I saw that estate as a monument to my achievements. The estate called for servants, for a maintenance staff, for foremen over the maintenance men. It called for lavish dinner parties, the expense of which would have made John D. Rockefeller groan. Once I gave out a general invitation to a barbecue dinner, expecting that perhaps 100 people would show up. Over 3,000 attended. The highway was tied up with a traffic jam for 2 miles each way, and the traffic patrolman never did forgive me. The clubhouse on the estate could sleep 40 guests in comfort and was seldom without a full load. Once the overflow swept into my private quarters. I arrived home hoping for some peace of mind and found a stranger asleep in my bed. Moreover, he had appropriated the only pair of pajamas I had available. Let us draw the curtain on the Hill estate. It went for a song shortly after the crash of 29. When I got over the initial shock, how relieved I felt. How peaceful, how newly powerful was the mind which had been overlaid with worry. 3 of my friends, whose combined assets were less than the amount I lost when I lost my estate, did not have faith in the great principle that every adversity has within it the seed of an equivalent benefit. One jumped off a high building on Wall Street, one fired a bullet into his brain, and the third man was hauled out of the Hudson River 6 weeks after he had jumped in. That I made money again. Of course I did. The principles of the science of achievement saw to that. My lost estate had not lost with it my knowledge that any goal set up by a human mind can be achieved by that mind's possessor. Ever since, I have lived comfortably but without show. What good is money when it becomes a millstone? Make sure your work and your money benefit someone besides yourself. One of the positive results that came after I had firmly closed the door on my experiences in the Catskill Mountains was this: I found time in which to write more books. These books have benefited me and they have benefited Dan, so they have benefited me with more than money. When Andrew Carnegie decided to use his great wealth to found free libraries, he greatly increased his peace of mind. Henry Ford was pretty tough about giving away his money. When at length he learned it was possible to find people who deserved it and would use it well, I am sure he felt the same quiet satisfaction. There is another important principle which ensures that as your wealth grows, so will your peace of mind. Do not hurt any other person in order that you may succeed. I am thankful I learned this early in life. When a man discovers himself and with it the ways in which he can earn big money, now and then he will see a way to put some extra weight on his side of the scales. Like the butcher's hand which is weighed along with the hamburger, it wouldn't be noticed. I could have added to my wealth by dishonest means on many an occasion, but I would have lost my peace of mind. Among the men I interviewed after I accepted my commission from Andrew Carnegie were several who were little better than pirates of the business world. In most cases I did not know this at the time. Later events often showed how much they had given up when, in effect, they stole from others or ruthlessly ruined others in order to aggrandize themselves. Some went to prison. Some stayed out of prison on legal technicalities, but who has peace of mind when no honest man will look him in the face? Today is the day of the large service corporation, often with a tremendous office staff. A man in a factory is likely to be judged by the kind of work he puts out, but a man in an office can push himself upward with various tricks of personality, tricks of paperwork, tricks of getting the other fellow to assume responsibility for mistakes, and so forth. To step up the ladder by stepping on another man's face is to make a mockery of the money you earn. There is no peace of mind in this, and often there is no health, no ability to be happy, no harmony at home. You can be left with the ability to buy what money can be and a degree of unhappiness rather more acute than a beggar's. That I have spoken to several men in my classes who confessed they had cut many comers of honesty and business morality. Now they wished to make a new start, but was it possible, when they attained the only true wealth, honestly earned wealth, would they not still be made miserable by the tensions of guilt? I assured them they would not if only they closed the door on the past. Let them consider dishonesty a mistake, even a disaster, but a past disaster. This is an important point with many ramifications. Not necessarily dishonesty, but also any other negative state of mind held in the past can be left in the past, just as one leaves physical circumstances. That I showed these men that now they were finding a new self, the past could not matter. The world is full of examples of men who learn from their own bad consciences, or even in prison, that no dishonesty ever pays. The lesson learned is the lesson learned, and for most men there is time enough and world enough to start again and build a glorious future. For an exception, I give you Al Capone. During the Great Depression, this notorious gangster set up free soup kitchens at which he fed numbers of the unemployed. He was fond of calling attention to these soup kitchens as proof of the good was doing his fellow man. Of course I speak of no such mockeries, rather let us think of men like O. Henry, who served a jail sentence for a crime. Surely it helped him at last to find himself, for it was afterward that he became known for his wonderful stories with all their deep understanding of human nature. Close the door on your past and keep it closed. I have heard it said that you never really get over the death of a loved one. This is so in the sense that every circumstance of your life, every joy and every sorrow, has an effect in shaping you into what you are. But you have great control over the way it shapes you. Never forget that. I am not one of those who believe in doing away with the natural emotion of sorrow when death occurs. Tears and sorrow are provided by nature as a safety valve for the overflowing emotions. Yet most people wait too long to close the door on mourning, or they never close it. We say, there is nous in worrying over something you can't control. Yet we worry over death for unconscionable periods of time, knowing all the while we cannot control it. The physical body comes from the air and the soil and goes back to the sources from which it came. Perhaps the mental and spiritual portions and some mysterious essence of life also go back to sources we can sense but cannot discover. So be it, carry along with you not the pain you knew when a loved one died, but rather the positive and sustaining memories. As life is a natural process, so death is also. Do you think it is possible to have only one great love in your life, especially if that love was sealed in marriage? Human experience proves this is not so. While I believe firmly in marriage, I know that the word marriage is not always synonymous with the word happiness. You have a right to happiness, and this is your life. When a marriage turns out to have been a mistake, when it can be broken but it is not broken, then the mistake is perpetuated and shadows all the rest of life. Sometimes the door of the past must be closed upon a marriage before either party to that marriage, or both, can find any kind of life success. A job that is past opens a new door to the future. Suppose you have lost your job through no fault of your own. Suppose, then, you nurse a great resentment and a festering hatred of your former employer who was so unjust to you. Meanwhile you are going around looking for another job and some thingies saying no to any prospective future employer. What says no? The negative qualities of hatred and resentment which beam from your mind to his. He cannot tell just what it is, both feels something disturbing about you and he doesn't want you in his office or his shop. Put the temporary setback firmly behind you, however go out with a determined will to get a better job than the one you'll san. Anyone who interviews you will feel the positive qualities that mean good man. What if you are questioned about your former employer? Say nothing bad about him. What was bad must always stay in the past and never be allowed to hinder the future. Jobs also seem to be favorite spots in which to grow grudges. Of course you have rights and it is no part of success or peace of mind to allow yourself to be stepped upon. Many little scratches in human relations, however, are nothing but that, just little scratches, and need not be reacted to as though they were deep wounds. How big are you? It takes a big person to succeed. Tobjin with, it takes a big person to see what is big, and worth owns attention, rather than waste emotional energy on trifling matters. When you see how you damage yourself by bearing resentment and grudges, you can put small annoyances in the past as soon as they occur. At times it is advisable to talk things over, point out how another person wounds others, and start afresh with the air cleared. But a nursed grudge is a viper in the bosom. It is a treasured negative. And you not only let it take away your peace of mind, you also encourage the formation of ulcers and many other ailments which the mind can inflict upon the body. Close that door. It is wonderful and gratifying to see how the habit of closing the door upon the past becomes one of the greatest of sustaining habits. It helps you take possession of your own mind and condition it for the attainment of any purpose you desire. Go the extra mile. I have often been asked to give a man something to do that helps him leave resentment behind him, especially where his job and his career are concerned. The best possible action is this: go the extra mile. Give more service and better service than you are paid for, find out more about your job and the job above it than you absolutely have to know. Work in a way that makes your job do more than it is expected to do for the organization that employs you. A young man was an estimator for a large printing firm. He didn't pay much attention to typefaces, being content to let the customers go on using the typefaces to which they were accustomed. This made his job easier, but, as I pointed out to him, it did nothing to qualify him as a man who really knows his job. He studied typefaces, arrangements of type on a page and other matters which lend effect and even artistry to broadsides and brochures. When his boss received compliments on the beautiful jobs you tum out, the boss realized what this young man was doing for his firm's reputation. The young man is now an executive of the firm, where before he was scarcely noticed. The young man also has relieved himself of a feeling of bitterness which might, in the end, have resulted in making him an old man with a mean little salary and a mean little soul. A saleswoman at a dry goods counter had decided that her salary and her small commissions paid her for going through the routine motions of selling what she found on the shelves, and that was that. One day a woman asked her so pleasantly and so positively to look for an item in the depths of the stockroom that she found herself looking, and when she discovered the item, she felt bigger inside. Thereafter she made a point of suggesting items which were not visible and of putting through special orders even when they resulted in little benefito herself. Soon she had a regular clientele. Customers were willing to aid in order to have her serve them. Moreover, her knowledge of her business caused the buyer to rely upon her judgment. She is a buyer now, with a grand career opening before her. She says, there are two factors that can make you successful: your job and yourself. You are always the most important factor. Of course you don't have to feel mean and small and imposed upon before you go the extra mile. A tonic in itself, the willingness to do more than you absolutely must is the hallmark of the big earner, the great leader, the happy and hearty person who day by day builds value into his life. See yourself on the next step up the ladder, and the next step above that one, and many rewarding steps ahead. And the image takes hold firmly in your mind and gets you going, should you meet a situation in which your extra efforts are not rewarded. Your positive mind finds courage and resourcefulness, and you leave the job that's wrong for you, push it back into your past and find another in which the image becomes real. Where you start never matters so much as where you are going, and it is first within your own mind that you conceive greatly and begin to go. Again, the supreme secret has been mentioned in several ways. You may not yet be able to put it into words, but it works more and more strongly in your favor as you read successive chapters of this book. Checking on Chapter 2, every adversity has within it the seeds of an equivalent or a greater benefit. As you meet the circumstances of life, they may seem adverse and damaging. Later you find that every so-called misfortune sows the seed of greater fortune to come. To help this mighty dynamic work its wonders in your life, close the door on your past. Carry along with you only what is pleasant and instructive. Leaving gloom and pain behind you, you can see the future and make it yours. Keep yourself aware of life's endless combinations of circumstances. Do not believe that one experience of lost love or lost opportunity or other misfortune has ended your chances of winning what you thought you had lost. Some of the world's greatest men knew failure after failure as they grew toward their ultimate success. Even a handicap becomes a benefit when the man himself decides the way in which it will be a benefit to him. When you speak of failure, you attract failure. When you speak of success, you attract success. The failure typically dwells upon his failure and drags it through his life like a prisoner dragging his chains. The failure also tends to be envious of those who succeed, and his envy and his malice rob him not only of wealth but also of peace of mind. Every age has its special advantages. An entire business may be labeled failure and yet come to life and make millions in the hands of a man whose success and speaks only of success. Is there a definite connection between wealth and peace of mind? There is a strong connection, but it is not unbreakable. Sufficient money is necessary to almost everyone who wishes to attain peace of mind, but wealth can steal happiness away from those who make it dishonestly or do not use it correctly. Use your work and your wealth to help others. Above all, make sure that as you climb the ladder of success you do not step upon anyone else. Cutting the corners of dishonesty sets up a feeling of guilt which can destroy happiness. Even so, one who has erred can put his error firmly in the past, close the door and go on to great accomplishment that go the extra mile in work situations especially. Grudges and a feeling of resentment play havoc with the mind's ability to conceive and achieve. Going the extra mile has a tonic effect in relieving the mind of built-in obstacles. Add to your work more than you are paid for. Always qualify yourself for the next step upward and the steps beyond. People who succeed are not people who hold grudges or who withhold their best work, but those who in every act and thought pave their way toward greater things. The basic mental attitude that brings wealth and peace of mind. A life of wealth enjoyed by a mind at peace comes most often to men who maintain a positive mental attitude. With definiteness of purpose you add great positive power to your own mental attitude, and you can use definite motives to sustain the actions which propel you toward your goal. At the same time you can set up spiritual guardians to keep your attitudes at a high, yes, level, avoid conflicts of motive. Tune in on other positive minds. The computers which are beginning to manage our world are complicated devices. Most of them, however, have a very simple basic principle: they say yes or no. They either open a kind of electrical gate or they keep it closed, and by multiplying this process they can assimilate and select all kinds of information. The mind of man is far more wonderful than any machine. Within it, however, there seems to be a kind of yes-no valve at the focal point of thinking. It is as though your awareness of a circumstance of life sent to your brain by your sight, hearing, and other senses presents itself at the yes-no point to be processed. A person who maintains a positive attitude will find every possible yes in that circumstance and make it part of his life. A person who maintains a negative mental attitude will lean toward the no side, miss much that is good, live with much that is painful and damaging. Nothing but a mental attitude. Nothing but a mental attitude. But it is right there that your success or your failure, your peace of mind or your nervous tension, your tendency toward good health or your tendency toward illness begins. Fortunately, it is possible for anyone to make the change from negativism to positivism, and thus basically condition his brain to bring all that is good in life. Moreover, there are certain control levers which the Creator makes available to us, and it is easy to see how successful people use these levers. Once you know what they are, I shall give you some here and some in other chapters so as to reinforce your memory. Now and then you will find repetition of names, facts and methods in this books, always with a view toward helping you remember. Control your mental attitude with definiteness of purpose. Emerson said, "The world makes way for a man who knows where he is going." Think what it means to know where you are going. Automatically you rid yourself of all kinds of fears and doubts which may have crept into the making up your mind process. Your purpose is definite and presto, all the limitless forces of your mind focus upon that purpose and no other. Knowing your purpose, you cannot be led astray by circumstances or words which have nothing to do with your purpose. Where, before, a day's work may have contained a good deal of wasted motion, now your efforts are lined up so that each mental or physical motion helps every other motion. You can see the connection with building wealth, for work done well is a basic wealth builder. Now see the connection with peace of mind. A man who works wholeheartedly at his job is not concerned with such matters as finding fault with others, disturbing his conscience by cutting corners in his work, watching the clock and so forth. Nor will he be discouraged by any obstacles which may crop up. His positive and focused mental attitude keeps him in a prime position to handle problems and overcome them. Is this a secret of genius? I have mentioned that many eminently successful men do not possess any greater intelligence than most other men possess. Yet their achievements are such that we may say that these men have genius. Surely it is the positive mental attitude of these men which makes their brain power, not greater, but more efficient and more available than most others. When I spoke to such men as Henry Ford, Andrew Carnegie, and Thomas A. Edison, I spoke with minds free of any fear or doubt that they could do anything they wished to do. I know that Andrew Carnegie was well aware of the need for a positive mental attitude. Before he undertook to back my success, he really put me on the spot as to my mental attitude. Looking at me shrewdly across his desk, that canny Scot said, "We've talked a long time and I have shown you the greatest opportunity a young man ever had to become famous, rich and useful. Now if I choose you out of the 240 other applicants for this job, if I introduce you to the outstandingly successful men in America, if I help you get their collaboration in finding out the true philosophy of success, will you devote 20 years to the job, earning your own living as you go along?" We have had sufficient discussion. I want your answer, yes or no. I began to think of all the obstacles that would stand in my way. I began to think of all the hurdles I would have to jump. I began to think of all the time I would have to spend, and the big job of writing, and the problem of earning my living all that while and so forth that I spent 29 seconds struggling with a negative mental attitude which, had it overcome me, would have affected me negatively ever after. How do I know I took just 29 seconds? Because when I found the positive mental attitude which I had lost temporarily, and said, yes. Mr. Carnegie showed me the stopwatch he had been holding beneath his desk. He had given me just 1 minute in which to show my positive state of mind, otherwise, he felt, he would not have been able to depend on it. I had beaten the deadline by just 31 seconds, and thereby embraced an opportunity that was destined to change and improve the lives of millions of people, including my own. A positive mind tunes in on other positive minds. Once I had accepted that great task and had set my mind confidently toward it, I found that my imagined obstacles simply melted away. Of course, my positive mental attitude helped me notably in finding out the success secrets of some 500 of America's wealthiest men, but also in making considerably more than a mere living. Am I a genius? I must say I have positive evidence I am not. In meeting many men I discovered a very valuable fact: a positive mind automatically obtains benefit from other positive minds. Are you aware of the general principle of radio broadcasting? It is this: when electrical vibrations of rapid frequency are impressed upon a wire, those vibrations leap into space. Another wire far away, the receiving antenna, can pick them up, and thus a message or a picture is transmitted over thousands of miles, or millions of miles in space-age communication. There are electrical currents in the brain. They give you a private broadcasting station through which you may send out any kind of thought vibrations you desire. Keep that station busy sending out thoughts of a positive nature, thoughts which will benefit others, and you will find you can receive kindred thought vibrations from other minds whose attitude is tuned to yours. When I visited such successful men as those I have mentioned, and many others such as John Wanamaker, Frank A. Vanderlip, Edward Bach and Woodrow Wilson, both they and I felt the attunement of mind to mind. Otherwise I surely would have met with opposition when I asked those top-ranking men to give me of their time and experience. Not only did such men spend hours talking to me, but also they served as my teachers and guides for year after year, and charged me nothing. Believe in what you are doing, and you too will see the great effect of your belief upon those whom you may request to help you. Doubt yourself and the no part of your mind takes over and draws defeat instead of victory. This barely sketches in the all-pervasive power of a positive mental attitude. Let us look at some of the other control levers, which combine with a positive mental attitude to give you wealth and peace of mind for an entire, victorious lifetime. The 9 major motives. It is not for nothing that court trials often concern themselves with questions of motive. Everything you do is the result of one or more motives. In various combinations we use 9 basic motives. The 7 positive motives are: 1. The emotion of love; 2. The emotion of sex; 3. The desire for material gain; 4. The desire for self-preservation; 5. The desire for freedom of body and mind; 6. The desire for self-expression; 7. The desire for perpetuation of life; AFFERDATH. The 2 negative emotions are: I. The emotion of anger and revenge; 2. The emotion of FR. In those 9 motives you can find the roots of everything you do or refrain from doing. Peace of mind is attained only by the exercise of the 7 positive motives as a general pattern of life. Rarely if ever does a person who has peace of mind exercise the 2 negative motives or emotions. You cannot have peace of mind while you fear anything or anyone. You cannot have peace of mind while you entertain the kind of anger which brings you to a desire for revenge or a desire to injure another, no matter what the justification may seem to be. Great men have no time to waste with a desire to injure others. If they did, they would not be great men. Great men are not immune to fear, but theirs is not the kind of fear that hangs on constantly and takes over all of life. Look to small, mean men to see lifelong patterns of fear and anger. Their minds are so filled with these negative influences that they cannot find the power to shape the circumstances they desire. Recently I heard about a man, now 70, who 15 years ago lost all his money in a real estate venture. Taking the advice of a friend, he had borrowed heavily in order to invest in vacant swampland on the assumption that in a couple of years the land would be in great demand for building lots. This did not transpire, the man's notes became due, and he had Tozi his retail shoe business sold out from under him. The friend who had badly advised him also had lost money. Nevertheless this man became filled with hatred toward his friend and said he would get even, if it's the last thing I do. It nearly was. 5 years of hatred left him incapable even of doing business. Meanwhile the friend prospered and seemed far out of reach of any puny revenge. The man who had lost his money at length lost the balance will of his mind and had to spend 6 months in a quiet place in the country surrounded by a high wall. In his last month of confinement, however, he was sufficiently recovered to listen to an adviser who pointed out to him that hatred and the desire for revenge had done him far more harm than had been done by his losing his money. He was persuaded to forgive the friend who had led him into the real estate deal. He even wrote to this man, telling of his change of heart. When he went back into business it was with love of his fellow men and the determination to keep his mind filled with positive, constructive motives. Beginning at the age of 60, he built a new career. Now, at 70, he is fairly well off, and most of all he has peace of mind, the one form of wealth which is indispensable. I myself have suffered from the effects of negative motives from time to time. When I went into hiding, as discussed in the last chapter, I acted at first upon a very wise motive of self-preservation. Soon, however, this turned into fear, and with the fear came misery. Fortunately I saw in time what was happening to me. It cannot happen again. You can call upon 10 princes of guidance to stand at the doors of your mind. You can make yourself aware of certain principles of personal guidance and guardianship, and to make these principles real and memorable, you can personalize them, see them as so many princes in armor who stand at the doors of your mind. These princes challenge every thought vibration which seeks to enter. They keep your mind positive, effective and free of discord. I shall name my own princes, a list which you may wish to modify to suit your own life requirements. The Prince of Peace of Mind. He stands at the very outer door and asks all callers if they come in peace to share my peace. If not, they are turned away. The Prince of Hope and Faith. He admits only those influences which keep my mind alerted with belief in my mission in life. The Prince of Love and Romance. He brings into my mind only those influences which keep love eternally fresh in my heart. The Prince of Sound Physical Health. He knows the kind of mental influences which can destroy health, and admits only those states of mind which help the body maintain its vigor. The Prince of Financial Security. When I desire him to stand on guard, he admits no thoughts save those which bring me worthy financial benefit. The Prince of Overall Wisdom. He is charged with passing certain thoughts into my store of knowledge when he sees they will benefit me or help me benefit others. The Prince of Patience. He keeps away all impulses to rush, to tackle jobs half prepared, to be in any way impatient with the power of time. The Prince of Normhill. Normhill is a very personal word I have created for my own use. Combining certain names, it means to me what it cannot mean to any other. Just so, create your own name for your own very personal prince. This prince stands guard along with all the others. The others from time to time may be relieved of duty. For instance, one hardly may wish continually to keep out all thoughts except those which have to do with financial security. Your special personal prince is always there, representing all the special personal influences in your life. Normhill is my ambassador at large who performs services not assigned to the other members of my invisible family of guides. When you have made yourself well aware of your core of spiritual princes, they serve to rally all your forces to solve any problem or to set up special lines of defense. Sometimes I find myself talking to someone whose antagonistic attitude begins to invade my peace of mind. Very well, I send a special alert to the Prince of Peace of Mind. Immediately he takes charge of the ramparts with doubled strength, and I am calm and in control of my own mind once more. Or, let us say, I feel some physical ache or pain. I call upon the Prince of Sound Physical Health to look into the cause, and get good results. I believe I have received benefits of healing which are beyond the power of ordinary medical science to explain. Why princes of guidance receive a certain compensation for their services. Their pay is my eternal gratitude. Daily I express this gratitude, first to each of the princes individually, then to all of them in their mighty group. You will find this expression of gratitude of great help in keeping your mind alerted to its own powers. I know that if I ever neglect it, I feel a neglect on the part of my princes. When, once again, I make myself aware every day that I have great spiritual forces at my command, they are once more, as strong as ever. Don't let the motive of material gain conflict with the motive of freedom. Freedom of body is easy to see and understand, but freedom of mind is a subtle matter. Fear and anger put the mind behind bars. Guilt wraps the mind in canes. To add a bit of levity to a serious matter, once there was a man who was encouraged to know himself. Immediately handcuffed himself to his bed, so he would not get up and rifle his own pockets during the night. All too often the motive of material gain excellent in itself conflicts with the excellent motive of freedom of body and mind, because in gaining what is material we give up freedom of mind, we load the mind with guilt and fear because we do not act honestly. In addition, one who makes his money through taking dishonest advantage of his fellow men has cheated himself of the genuine joy which comes with honest success. When you obey the rules of a game, and win, you have done something for your soul. When you cheat and win, you only call it winning, but you have really lost instead. I believe I was fortunate in starting my career very early in life, so that I learned life's lessons quite early. Let me tell you of an experience I had while I was holding my first job. I was just out of business college and I was inexperienced in the ways of life and the character of my employer owned a number of banks. He had placed his son as a cashier of one of his banks, in a distant town. One night a hotel manager in that town telephoned me, saying my employer's son was in serious difficulty. He had not been able to reach my employer. Immediately, I boarded the train and arrived in the town early the next morning. When I went to the bank I found the door closed but unlocked. Inside, I discovered that the vault had been left open and beautiful green currency was scattered all over the teller's counter. I closed the door and picked up the telephone. I managed to get my employer on the phone and told him why I had gone to that town and what I had found on my arrival. In great distress, he said, "Go ahead and count the money. Balance the books, draw a draft on me for whatever shortage there may be." I settled down to counting the money. To my great surprise, not a cent was missing. I sat there looking at those piles of greenbacks. My youth had been tragic, turbulent and poor. My present state was one of bare solvency. I sat there looking at nearly $50,000 in cash, knowing that I could put at least half of it into my pocket and nobody would be the wiser. My employer's son showed obvious signs of mental instability. Everyone would assume he had taken the money. He even had acted as though he had filled his own pockets and I was the only one who knew he had not. The motive of material gain nudged heavily at me. But the motive of freedom said, "Don't do it." Or rather, it was something that kept me honest, for at that time I could not have named the major motives. Perhaps that something was the result of certain sessions I had had with my stepmother before I had left home, in which she had instilled into me the fact that I was in control of my own mind and that always I must live with myself. I locked the money into the vault forthwith, then phoned my employer and told him there was no deficiency to make up, not a cent had been stolen. I walked out of that bank with a mind at peace, a mind that was free and joyously positive, forever after I have placed the motive of freedom ahead of the motive of material gain. I have succeeded in having all the money I need without ever hampering either my inward or outward freedom. This episode was one of several which led me straight to Andrew Carnegie and my realization of my goal in life. My employer was grateful for the way in which I had protected his reputation as best I could. He was responsible later for me entering Georgetown University Law School. This led through a chain of circumstances to my assignment to interview Mr. Carnegie. If I had yielded to the material gain motive that day in the bank, the science of personal achievement might never have come into being. Yes, as Emerson suggested, there is a silent partner in all our transactions, and woe is the lot of the man who tries to drive a sharp bargain with life. Life reflects your own thoughts back to you. Thoughts are things, a poet said, and truly they have an existence of their own, so that a curse comes back to curse you and a blessing comes back to bless you, reflected by the mighty mirror of life. Another poet said, "I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul." This too is true, and the two truths harmonize. Send out positive thoughts from a positively oriented soul and the world will reflect back greater and greater positive influences to help you. Come back and read the list of 9 basic motives. Concentration: the 7 positive motives. Remember, it is possible for these motives to come into conflict, as we have seen, but by and large they drive one way, and with a positive mental attitude they take you the way you want to go. We shall not say farewell to the motives till we are finished with this book, but let us now pay our respects briefly. Love has limitless scope. Handle it in a spirit of reverence, for it is tuned to the eternal. Give freely of it and you will attract as much as or more than you give. Stop giving love and you stop receiving. With no other emotion or motive or desires, the mirror of life so very evident, sex is the great creative force of the universe. On its highest plane it merges with love, but love can exist without being sexual. The mighty power of sex can be transmuted into action for the achievement of profound purpose, and so important is this matter that later on we shall devote an entire chapter to it. On the other hand, sex may be debauched and misused, an itis in disguise that it brings grief and trouble to mankind and gives itself an underserved bad reputation. Self-preservation can become a negative force when one seeks it without regard to the rights of other people. It is instilled by nature to help us stay alive. Even so, the human being assumes the prerogative of rising above it. When a sheep is sinking, it is women and children first, and there are many parallel instances which call forth a nobility in human nature. Self-expression is part of finding oneself. It is part of one's freedom to be oneself. Thus it is positive, constructive and infinitely valuable. Only make sure that your own means of self-expression do not demean or damage others. Perpetuation of life after death belongs among the earliest beliefs and motives of mankind. It should be bounded by common sense and a true understanding of one's relationship to that change known as death. When wrapped in superstition and fear, this motive leads only to wretchedness. It can turn life into a preparation for death and hamper an entire civilization. The surest way of finding peace of mind. The surest way of finding peace of mind is that which helps the greatest number of others to find it. Let this be your guide to your use of the great motivating forces, then you will know you are using them correctly, not corrupting them. Is their peace of mind in prayer. There can be. There should be. But note how many people go to prayer only in the hour of a misfortune, when the motive of fear dominates their minds. The approach must be negative in that case, and so, in terms of peace of mind, the results must be negative as well. Prayers which bring peace of mind proceed from a mind which gives forth a confident message even though that mind may be afflicted with problems and sorrow. Prayers which free great forces to solve problems are born in minds which know that the problems can be solved once the forces are found and have perfect confidence in the existence of those forces. Along with many others, I see evidence of an intelligence beyond man's. I believe that the positively conditioned mind may at times tune in on that intelligence. Yet mind conditioning through prayer or resolution is something an individual must accomplish for himself. When the Creator made man free to seek his own destiny, and choose between good and evil, he gave man this prerogative as well. Every great accomplishment of any man at any time first had to exist as a thought before it could exist as reality. Have you recognized the supreme secret? Checking on chapter 3, life says yes. When you maintain a positive mental attitude, the mind of man is more wonderful than any computer. Like a computer, however, it seems to process much thinking at a yes or no gate. A positive mental attitude helps you find every possible yes in every life circumstance. Even if your attitude presently is negative, you can change it to positive and open your life to all that is rich and rewarding. Control your mental attitude with definiteness of purpose. Famous and successful men never show any doubt as taught their ability to do what they wish to do. Anyone at any stage of his life can win the benefits of this mind-transforming method. Focus your mind upon a single purpose and you seem to achieve genius powers because your mind works far more efficiently. Now you find ways to handle problems that used to stump you, and to set obstacles aside. A positive mind tunes in on other positive minds. Through this mental broadcasting you exchange priceless information and guidance. Control the mere motives that control your life. 7 positive motives and 2 negative motives stand behind everything you do. Small men allow the 2 negative emotions, anger and fear, to rob them of peace of mind and prevent their minds from conceiving and achieving greatly. Big men use the 7 positive motives to build the kind of lives they want. You can form Prince Soft guidance to stand at the doors of your mind and prevent negative influences from entering. When it will make use of such spiritual princes, they are always ready to take care of any emergency situation, such as a threat to health, as well as your day-to-day needs. You can prevent your motives from conflicting with each other. The desire for material gain may conflict with the desire for freedom, but freedom of mind and body is the more important. The emotion of love is yours as long as you give love to others. Sex is a creative force which should not be debauched or misused. The belief in a life after death must be freed from superstition and fear. Self-expression and self-preservation are great human rights which benefit you when they do not harm others. All the positive motives will guide you, and the negative motives, if they touch you, will not harm you. If you remember, the surest way of finding peace of mind is the way which helps the greatest number of others to find it. Point 4. When you are free of fear, you are free to live. Free yourself of fear, and you free yourself of a man-made devil. 7 major fears reinforce each other: the fear of poverty, the fear of criticism, the fear of ill health, the fear of loss of love, the fear of loss of liberty, the fear of old age, the fear of death. Separate your self-made fears from the fears which are necessary for self-preservation. Make way for self-confident faith in yourself, the indispensable ingredient of a life worth living. When you fear something, that thing is more likely to find you and harm you. When you look a threat in the eye and know you are going to overcome it, that is when great powers come to your aid. Fear, the most powerful of negative motives, is like prayer in reverse. Instead of appealing to the constructive forces which surround us, it appeals to the forces of destruction. It becomes a god in itself, demanding endless painful sacrifices. People rarely will admit that lives of bitter privation may be founded on nothing more than constant fear, and yet you can see it happen all around you. The first fear I shall mention is a terribly magnetic fear. The more of it you have, the more you are likely to attract. Point 1. The fear of poverty. Now and again I have had occasion to meet people I knew in my own poverty-stricken youth. Off late I have been meeting their now grown children. When I have known both parent and child, I often can trace the persistence of a kind of family fondness for poverty. Fearing poverty with good reason, as it ground them down, hating it and protesting it, such families have nevertheless allowed their negative emotions to dull their wits and cancel their courage. I am the greatest nation in the world, a nation that fairly throbs with opportunity. They settle down to live in want. Some member of the family may make some gesture toward lifting himself out of his rut, but it always turns out to be a feeble gesture that lacks follow-through. Perhaps it salves his conscience to have this gesture to point to for the rest of his life. Worse yet, whole families are brought up in the belief that God intended them to be poor. Surely it must be the final twist of fear which equates the idea of God with the idea of persecution. To be poor and not to like being poor is a good step toward becoming rich. But put aside your fear of poverty. See it rather as merely that point from which you take off. Let your intimate knowledge of the unwanted condition become a sustaining force as you drive toward the condition you do want: prosperity, even opulence. Let your present necessity for pinching pennies make you aware of the power of money. Let your lack of capital make you aware of the many ways you can make use of other people's money merely by paying them a fair fee for their money's hire. Know that much education is free, that self-education in some fields can be better than school education, that vast stores of information may be used free, that industry and trade stand with open arms to receive the willing worker. Know that our economy is so vast and various that any special talent can find the place where it is needed, and our economy is filled with unmet needs which you can meet. That I forbear from giving you a list of the many well-known men who began their lives in poverty. We have met many of them and shall meet others. Cast out fear of poverty and drive ahead. Point 2. The fear of criticism. Your mind has limitless power to make a dream come true provided you allow your mind to work unhampered. Few fears hamper a mind so quickly as the fear of criticism. It can stop you before you get started. And yet it is nothing but the influence of another mind or other minds, a negative influence which often is only imagined. A person who is filled with fear of criticism often will not put forth his ideas lest he be rebuffed, and so he loses his great gifts of imagination and self-reliance. That we may examine the careers of men who achieved mighty breakthroughs in their fields, and we may marvel at the way in which they found their abilities and put them to effective use. At the same time we may see many of the obstacles they had to overcome. Rarely, however, do we know of the adverse criticism many such men faced. Had they feared this criticism and let it take root in their minds, all their ability to conceive and achieve might have been crippled. Indeed, they never might have felt it, for their minds would not have been free minds that drive ahead. The automobile, of course, would not work. Nor would the airplane. Nor would space travel. By the time Henry Ford was ready to manufacture automobiles on a mass production basis, the automobile obviously worked, but mass production of such tricky devices was sneered at. They were a laboratory curiosity. Nobody could supply the gasoline necessary, nor the rubber, nor ensure that such necessities would be available to a motorist wherever he might travel. Furthermore, said the bankers with whom Henry Ford preferred not to do business, people simply would not buy such a high-priced gadget in sufficient quantities. Almost everyone who knew Ford's plans condemned them on one ground or another. Surely the sustaining power of love helped Ford to know his own mind, for Mrs. Ford said simply, "Go ahead no matter who criticizes." More recently, a man named Henry Land took a photograph of his young daughter. She wanted to see the picture right away. He explained that first the roll of photographic paper must be taken out of the camera and developed in a darkroom by means of certain chemicals. Once the negatives were obtained, they had to be printed by intense light upon another kind of paper which in its turn needed chemical treatment, and so, at length, pictures would appear. At this point his unhampered mind took hold. Why not build a camera which produced finished pictures? Anyone who knew anything about photography could have given him a dozen reasons why not, but criticism did not stay the development of the Land Polaroid camera, which does exactly what young Miss Land requested. Criticism cripples as well in the realm of pure ideas. When I set out to organize the science of personal achievement, I was almost snowed under by the criticism heaped upon my head. Most of the criticism came from my nearest relatives, and 'tis hard to take. I could not then have put in words the power that kept me going, but I had my mind upon my goal, not upon obstacles, and I kept going. This first practical science of personal achievement has earned more money for its users than was contained in Andrew Carnegie's entire fortune. Andy was very likely the world's richest man. It is one thing to listen to advice from a person qualified to give advice. It is quite another to allow adverse criticism to blunt the fine edge of your own conquering mind. Notice how much of such criticism comes from people who criticize everything, in particular, from people who criticize everybody who tries to succeed. Failure, like other forms of misery, loves company. Cast out fear of criticism and drive ahead. Point 3. The fear of ill health. Probably you know more than one person whose main topic of conversation is health, or rather, ill health. Such people would rather describe their operations than talk of the benefit they derived, if indeed they needed the operations in the first place. They start each day by searching for symptoms, first from the hair down and then from the toes up, and will find many a sure sign of illness with which to bore their friends. They buy every quack remedy that comes along, follow every health fad one year which turns out to be an anti-health fad the next year. They are hypochondriacs. They imagine illness, fear illness, and literally bring illness upon themselves, for such is the negative power of the mind. That in my 60-odd years of adulthood I have been gratified to see that physicians give increasing attention to psychosomatic illness, or bodily illness which originates in the mind. Since man's earliest history, however, it has been obvious that almost all of our illness is caused by unpeace of mind. Here is a very partial list of symptoms which can arise from mental conflicts, fears, and tensions: headache, indigestion, ulcers, arthritic pains, constant fatigue, sleeplessness, slow healing of wounds, kidney trouble, circulatory trouble, frigidity, impotence, rashes, other skin afflictions, mouth infection, rectal disorders, muscular cramps, and more, and more. Then there are the many mental disorders, ranging from extreme nervous tension to outright insanity, which often are caused or aggravated by a mind which fights itself. The list of ills to which body and mind may yield is almost endless, so let your first step toward good health be this: do not dwell upon the image of illness. The mind tends to transmute all beliefs into their physical equivalent. Why, then, see yourself as anything but a person who enjoys good sound health from top to toe and back again. Even if you do contract some illness or injury, hold to the peaceful knowledge that it is merely an adverse incident of life which of course you will overcome. Moreover, a mind filled with faith and confidence can better see beyond a disability to healed condition, the yes condition, and this above all is a healing aid which cannot be supplied by medicine. It is conceived, and therefore it is boundlessly powerful. Faith is the greatest of all healers. Faith is the great universal medicine which prevents illness, cures illness, builds air resistance to further illness, heals and sustains. Have faith in your health, and it is as though ill health starves to death for lack of food. Keep ill health out of your conversation. Keep ill health out of your mind. Reflect your faith in the image of a Prince of sound physical health, and that Prince stands by, almost invincible. Then, to prove conclusively that you have stopped believing in ill health, empty your medicine chest down the drain. Cast out fear, O fill health and drive ahead. Point 4. Fear of the loss of love. Love walks hand in hand with peace of mind. A couple who truly love one another often reflect that love upon the world like a beacon of happiness. They belong to each other, we say, and in many ways they do. Yet look beyond the trite statement and you will see that belonging is not the same as selfishly possessing. One who really loves another does not hold his mate in chains of jealousy, for this is fear, fear of the loss of love. True love knows no fear. Moreover, love cannot be demanded, it must be given. Should it cease to be given, it no longer exists. The end of love is not pleasant. No adverse circumstance is pleasant when it occurs. Yet to fear it in advance, as so manido, is as damaging as to imagine one's self dead in advance, often that a particular person's love may be lost, but love itself never is lost. The capacity for love beats with the heart. It seeks another, and love for one person always can be transmuted into love for another. Know that there is another. Know too that love also transmutes itself into great achievement and great service. Charles Dickens' first love almost ended in tragedy when he found it was not reciprocated. He transmuted his love into his writing, and his most popular book, David Copperfield, arose from a heart which seemed to be broken. Love generously. Love fully. Love faithfully. Love is a great power for good when you get it, but love can destroy you when it gets you. Do you think 1 am cynical in talking thus of the most sublime of all emotions? No, 1 am following the purpose of this book in showing you the lessons of life itself. Any fear holds you back and hurts you. Cast out fear, O floss off love and drive ahead. Point 5. Fear of the loss of liberty. One read recently about a man who had served a term in prison and had been released. He had difficulty in finding a job, for he was honest enough to say he was an ex-convict. He was for a time unable to come home to his family, for they mistrusted him. Within himself, however, he knew he was a changed man, and with quiet persistence he has won back a place in the world of honest people. He expressed his thankfulness at having regained the privileges of working for a living, of planning a career, of having a family and a home. But all these blessings have their foundation in a greater blessing, he said. I have my liberty. Millions have learned what happens when an entire nation loses its liberty. The necessities of life may all be present, and many of the luxuries, but without the liberty to speak one's mind and live one's own life, all the rest seems a mockery. One recall a group of men and women who crossed the ocean in Otany, unseaworthy boat, and nearly drowned several times in order to win their way to our land of liberty. This sailing craft began its voyage with 2 masts, and at one port of call they sold 1 mast in order to buy provisions, yet still they struggled onward to find liberty, and I know of many who have given up so much liberty of body and mind that they might as well be in prison or living under a dictator. Also I know many others who so constantly fear the loss of liberty that the fear itself becomes a fetter on their souls, as is the case with fear of any kind. When I speak of freedom of mind and body, I speak of a basic, personal freedom. It is not a physically absolute freedom. If each of us were absolutely free to do whatever he wanted to do, we would have chaos instead of civilization. Peace of mind includes going along with the laws and customs of our times and our society. It also includes a balanced view toward any temporary loss of freedom. A little while ago I suffered a temporary loss of liberty to get about as I wish. A light case of influenza sneaked past my Prince of sound physical health and sent me to bed for 3 days. I could have fretted about the appointments I had taken, but if I had, my mind would have lost its liberty. Instead, I devoted the time to peacefully and restfully outlining this book. It had been a task which I had been getting around to for a long time. Once again I proved the soundness of the principle that every adversity carries within it the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. The concept of time is closely allied to the concept of freedom. Time is wealth, and unlike money, when it is gone you cannot replace it. Many a man who arrives promptly for an appointment only to be kept waiting, or who is stuck in a traffic jam, gets into a stew over this infringement of his right. Spend his time as he wishes to spend it. I have pointed out to salesmen that time spent in an anteroom can be time spent in reviewing one's sales pointers and thus be the better prepared for selling, or, in many cases, the time may be spent in observing and listening so that one gathers useful information about the customer's needs. For a salesman or anyone else, enforced waiting time can be transmuted into a time of quiet relaxation which restores the strength of mind and body. Even a driver in a traffic jam can keep his mind peaceful and thoughtful, and it is often on such occasions, while one is alert but not heavily concentrating, that the subconscious mind feeds back the answers to questions and problems which may have lain within it a long time. Peace of mind is a many-splendored thing. Now connect it with the statement you read a moment ago: time is wealth, and unlike money, when it is gone you cannot replace it. Peace of mind is so beneficial to your entire well-being, however, that it is almost certain to extend your life and to help you keep active and productive far into your later years, so that lost time can in a sense be replaced, and at a most valuable period. Liberty includes peace of mind. Peace of mind is a basic liberty. We have too many slaves to the clock, too many slaves to the bankbook, too many slaves to convention and to self-consciousness. Before you say I am free, see if you answer yes to these questions. When circumstances require me to use my time in a way I did not plan to use it, do I, in that time, know my own mind and use it beneficially? Have I set up my work schedule so that I need not live in fear of work overwhelming me and stealing my hours of rest? When I find a way to express myself, and know it is socially acceptable, do I continue to express myself in that manner even though others may think it strange? Have I freed myself of any family or regional or cultural custom which has hampered my career or my personal life? Am I willing to question the ways in which other people do things, and never make an absolute guide out of, that's the way it is done? Do I realize I am not working for money, but for that which money can buy? If you honestly answer yes to all these questions, you are essentially a free person and you do not fear the loss of freedom. You know that freedom cannot be taken away from the soul. Notice the last question especially. When I became aware of the drives which enable men to make great fortunes, I also became aware that some rich men do not have peace of mind. An appreciation of money is a far cry from the worship of money, which in the end destroys happiness. Remember, this book shows you how to grow rich and have peace of mind. Liberty extends in many directions. Those who fear slavery are the ones who have made themselves slaves, for they have conditioned themselves to it and they know how defenseless they have become. Cast out fear of loss of liberty and drive ahead. Point 6. Fear of old age. I used to be a good amateur shortstop, mourns a man of 75, and now I couldn't stop a grounder that was rolling more than 1 mile an hour. Such remarks are typical of those who fear old age and so cannot know peace of mind in the years which should be most rewarding. Old age is a handicap, yes, but only in connection with certain types of physical motion. Nature never takes away anything without replacing it with something of equal potential value. When nature takes away youth, she replaces it with wisdom. It is impossible for a young person to possess the accumulated wisdom and experience of a person of ripe age. Think that over before you say old age is a drawback. It is pathetic to see people assume extra handicaps because they are past 40 or past 50 or even past 70, when these handicaps exist only in their own minds. They show an inferiority complex, allow younger people's thinking to overwhelm their own mature and experience-backed thinking. They apologize for being old, as though living past youth were a disgrace. They do not expect to feel the impulses of initiative, imagination and self-reliance, and so, of course, they don't feel these so-called youthful qualities. They act as though losing youth's springy muscles must mean you lose the power inside your head. This is so only if you wish it, only if you fear old age. Recently I set up an entirely new series of schools in several cities, where men of all ages can learn the art of positive thinking and how to use it to achieve success. Is it odd that a man of my age should embark upon such an enterprise? On light o' a fearful, hampered mind is it odd? While I remain in direction, I can hire younger, more active men to do the leg work. In fact, I can do a better job of such direction than I could have done 40 years ago. I have that much more experience. Also I have peace of mind in depth, as I did not have it 40 years ago, when I did not yet completely see the forces which make men what they are. Part of the fear of old age, with many people, stems from the feeling that an old person inevitably must miss a great deal. You cannot partake in so much that is going on. Because of this, some people of ripe years attempt to masquerade as youths and only succeed in being ridiculous. That it is not necessary to partake physically of the entire world around you so long as you keep in touch with that world. Every few years we see an advance in the means of communication, so that the affairs of all the world can be brought into the living room. Surely the neighbors of my youth would have been less ignorant and superstitious if they had had today's opportunities to know what is going on. Keep yourself in tune with youthful states of mind. However, I invite you to make use of a procedure I have found very useful. Every year I subtract 1 year at the time of my birthday. Then I pay particular attention to the aspects of the world which appeal to a person of that age. I am now back in the late 20s, renewing my acquaintance with my state of mind in that era, and also with much that is unique with the present late 20s generation. Viewing as I do from the vantage point of experience, I have doubled fun, and at the same time I gain a perspective on myself as a younger person might see me. The experience is both valuable and delightful. Look deeply into your own vast experience, refresh your deep knowledge of human nature, find and feel the positive forces which never are out of reach. Old age can be the greatest time of your life. Cast out fear of old age and drive ahead. 7. Fear of death. My father tried to fill me with the fear of fire and brimstone which would be my lot after death. In fact, he tried to beat the fear into me. Fortunately it never took hold, even though such a dismal belief was fostered by our local church. If you have to rise above your religion in order to rid yourself of the fear of death, then rise above. Nobody has the right to tell you that his way is the way to enjoy yourself after you die. You need only to look down the street where another group of people is being assured that another way is the only way. Again, you may believe, as I do, that nothing you do in your lifetime has any effect upon what the life spirit may experience or where it may go after death, and it is still a belief. No more that it is, however, a belief which helps you considerably in living a good, useful, hearty, happy life right now, and enjoying every bit of it. As for your being honest and helpful with your fellow men, so that they too may enjoy living, this is part of your peace of mind, part of your success in living. During my entire life I never have sought anyone's opinion about anything, unless I had reason to believe that another person knew more about a subject than I did. I have found many opinions about what happens after death, but I never have found anyone who knew anything about the subject. Shall I fear death, then, merely because it is unknown? No, I shall remind myself that there are 2 types of circumstances. Type 1 is the kind of circumstance which one may control, modify or avoid. This type is worthy of one's attention. Type 2 consists of circumstances which one cannot control, of which death is the prime example. I shall therefore do what I can to remain in good health and good spirits, avoid obvious threats to life, and in other ways make logical use of the motive of self-preservation. But as for giving a second thought to death itself, why worry about the uncontrollable? You wish to provide that your money or property goes to your loved ones after you die. Very well, this is controllable. We do not delude ourselves into thinking we will not die. Yet having mastered the philosophy which accepts death as inevitable and which makes no false attempt to see what lies beyond the veil we cannot penetrate, you will fear nothing. Your mind will turn from death to life, from no to yes, from guesses to realities. Cast out the fear of death and drive ahead. Man was made to live in full possession of himself. Whoever created man gave this wonderful new creature a possession not shared by any other creature, the possession of his own mind. Along with this, the unknown Creator provided that man be capable of fear, because justified fear is a part of self-preservation. One who meets a tiger on a jungle trail, and has no weapon in his hand, is well advised to be fearful and to take immediate measures toward his self-preservation. Likewise do we exercise caution in any circumstance of inherent danger. The motorist, one hopes, drives with attention to the rules of safety. The child is taught to look both ways before he crosses the street. Self-made fears, however, are another story. Apparently man's mind must also be capable of entertaining self-made fear, or else it could not have its great breadth of creativeness. Yet both through the study of psychology and through common sense observation we see that self-made fears are unhealthful and damaging. Being in full possession of your own mind, you can free yourself of this kind of fear. When you relate yourself proper life you have no need for such fears and no occasion in which to suffer them. I repeat, if you have to rise above your religion in order to rid yourself of fear, go ahead and rise above it. Along with this, if you have to become bigger than your local folkways to rid yourself of fear, go ahead and rise above them. If you have to rid yourself of certain people's company in order to rise above your fears, go ahead and rid yourself of such company, knowing the world is full of people who are better employers or better customers or better friends for you. You would take drastic steps to get rid of any poison that found its way into your food. So let it be with fear, the mind poison. Fear is the tool of a man-made devil. Self-confident faith in oneself is both the man-made weapon which defeats this devil and the man-made tool which builds a triumphant life. And it is more than that. It is a link to the irresistible forces of the universe which stand behind a man who does not believe in failure and defeat as being anything but temporary experiences. Again the supreme secret has beckoned to you. When at last I give it to you beyond question, you will not be surprised. Checking on Chapter 4, fear is like prayer in reverse. With positive prayer we appeal to positive and helpful forces beyond ourselves, with fear we appeal to negative, destructive forces. Anything you fear is much more likely to harm you than it would be if you did not fear it. This is notably true of the fear of poverty, which cancels the courage necessary to leave poverty behind you. No matter how many generations of your family may have been poor, your mind has limitless power to make a desire come true. To make a beneficial desire come true, your mind must work unhampered. Fear of criticism can cripple even a highly intelligent mind. Many successful men had to overcome obstacles of which we know, but also had to overcome criticism. Of the damaging wishes which, alas, come true, the most prevalent is a wish we generally would deny having, the wish for ill health, which is founded on the fear of ill health. A long list of ailments arise from a fearful mind which fights itself. Faith is the greatest health sustainer and the greatest healer. Only fear can rob you of love and liberty. True love is not possessive love. The capacity for love remains even when love is denied, and fear should not hamper the expression of your love as transferred to another person. For love cannot be demanded, it must be given. Liberty, too, lives within the heart despite outward circumstances. Loss of liberty as well may be incurred within the heart even when outward circumstances indicate one is free. Freedom is a many-splendored thing, and you should search your life to find where you may have lost it and substituted the slavery of fear instead. The years past youth can be the best years of your life. Nature always provides a compensation for anything she takes away. Giving up the intense physical drive of youth, we acquire wisdom and experience which only age can bring. Modern devices help us keep in touch with the world. Reducing 1 year from your age on each birthday gives you perspective both on youth and age. The fact of death need not be denied, but nobody knows what lies beyond death's impenetrable curtain, so there is nothing to fear from a circumstance we cannot control. And no matter how old you are, you can keep yourself so busy living that the fear of death finds no place in your mind. Point 5. Will you master money or will it master you? Anything that robs you of peace of mind robs you of life's greatest wealth. You may lose peace of mind by pursuing money too anxiously, or by trying to acquire more money than you can spend wisely. Money you earn through constructive work is the money most likely to benefit you. It is a mistake to deprive young people of the need to know life through work. Anyone can save, and the effort you make towards saving a percentage of your income gives you a true knowledge of the value of money. Saving also prepares you to handle many opportunities which otherwise might slip by. In my explorations of the points of view of young people I find a great appreciation of money, most especially when a good sum of money is yet to be earned. This is proper enough. A lack of money makes the business of living so difficult it is very likely to destroy peace of mind. So the young man pursues money. For a good part of his life he is likely to have no difficulty whatsoever in spending as much as he makes. If he has a family, they help him spend it. A successful man, however, is not very old before he begins to accumulate some money beyond his immediate needs and his household bank account. This money is likely to go into investments, real estate and the like. Be he a truly positive-minded man, he will soon own considerable amounts of both property and money. And somewhere along the line he will have passed an invisible border. He is now rich in the sense that he has a considerable surplus above his needs. Undoubtedly he can fulfill any reasonable want. And so, while his financial records show he is rich, his inward and very private record should show he has peace of mind. That he will have peace of mind if he has mastered money. He will not if money has mastered him. A man who makes a big splash may be a man who has gone overboard. The big splash is the big show of one's material wealth. I have freely admitted my own weakness for making a big splash in the days of my Catskill estate, which I was fortunate enough to lose before it permanently harmed me. Not every man is endangered by making a vast show of his wealth, and some seem to thrive on it. Others enter upon such conspicuous display that obviously they have gone overboard. Their souls are drowning in their sea of dollars. Some years ago a man who had earned several $1,000,000 suddenly went bankrupt. When the lawyers searched his assets, they found a large warehouse filled with valuable antique furniture, magnificent paintings, and the like. They all belonged to the man who was bankrupt, and he had paid for them in cash. But had he ever enjoyed them? Most of those precious items never had been unpacked. He liked to talk about his treasures, however, and make himself sound like a veritable Croesus. Such an accumulation mania is at the opposite pole from a mind that knows peace. They are going to take it away from me. The fear of poverty has a strange and ugly first cousin. It is the rich man's fear that his money will be taken away from him, or that he will not be allowed to pile up his money into 10 times the sum, possibly could use 20 times, 30 times. I once knew a majority stockholder of the fabulous Coca-Cola Company. He had gathered money in many ways, and was worth about $25 million. Did he have peace of mind? He had a mind filled with hatred and mistrust. His worst hatred was directed toward the government. Although Hugh was then well in his 80s, he always prophesied that the government would cause him to die a pauper. The last time I ever saw him, he asked me a most significant question: if you were in my place, what would you do to protect your peace of mind and save your money? I had determined that for the sake of my own peace of mind never would start a quarrel with this man, but, if he ever asked me a direct question, he would receive a direct answer. Even so, I asked him now if he wanted my honest opinion. Yes, he said. Naturally. Well, said I, if I were in your place and wanted peace of mind, I would not save my money. Your peace of mind and your money have become enemies who cannot live side by side. If I were you, I would first convert all my money into United States savings bonds so that it would go to work for the benefit of all the people. Then I would pile all those bonds into my fireplace and set fire to them. And as I watched my money go up the chimney, I would watch a great deal of my unhappiness bum away. My friend snapped, "Don't be facetious." I was never more serious in my life, I replied. If I had your fortune and it deprived me of my peace of mind, I would first put my money where it would be well distributed, and then I would burn every symbol of my government's debt to me. Then I would go to bed and sleep like a child and wake up feeling peaceful and free. I did not expect this man to follow my advice. To the day headed he lived in fear and bitterness, and I believe that the illness and debility which dogged him long before he died was rooted in his love not of mankind, but of money. There are very few people for whom advice to burn their money would be good advice. The principle is what holds for every one of us. Nothing, absolutely nothing is as precious as your peace of mind. Few young people see this. Some people see it as they gain more experience. Many never see it. Remember, you can be rich with peace of mind, but if money or anything else gets in the way of your peace of mind, choose peace of mind and let the other go. Notice I made no attempt to evaluate my friend's complaint against the government. His complaint may in some ways have been justified. It was his attitude I drove at, an attitude of fear and distrust, while he was at least 25 times a millionaire and could have done so much toward making himself and others happy. How much money does a man need? Andrew Carnegie certainly had a firm hold on methods for making money. In his later years, his earnest wish was to give this know-how to the average man. Mr. Carnegie was one of the first of the enlightened industrialists who saw how important it is for a nation to spread its wealth. He saw that millions can be rich in the sense of having plenty. He also saw that, in the nature of things, the man who has millions always will be an exception. He saw that a goal of millions of even a million, is not the right goal for the majority of men. For many, such a goal sets up strains which deny peace of mind. They may give up too much that is necessary for men of their personality, and so end with nothing. He admonished me again and again to make this clear, and I have done my best to do so. How much money, then, does a man need? As much as will keep him and his loved ones in what he considers solid comfort, along with enough luxury so that he may feel he has tasted the treats of life. Aiming for this, and always maintaining his peace of mind, he conditions himself to a full use of his self-confident faith, and lo! Out of this conditioning he often finds a money-making power beyond his dreams. For such a man, excess money never will be a curse. He knows how to live, so heck knows how to broaden his life. He has never tried to cheat others, so he knows how to help others. The man who wanted $100 billion. A student of mine once flew all the way from India to have an interview with me. First he sent me a letter in which he stated that his major purpose in life was to accumulate 100 times as much wealth as Henry Ford had accumulated, or about $100 billion. He wished to be 100,000 times a millionaire. When at length we sat in my study, I asked him what he will do with that modest little sum of money. After some hesitation, he admitted, honestly, I don't know. Well, I said, the possession of $100 billion by one individual poses a threat to the world. But let us put that aside. If you desired to spend the sum in helping the people of India overcome the superstitions and outmoded customs which have held them in bondage for centuries, I'd have some sympathy with you. It seems to me that you just want the money for the sake of outdoing Henry Ford. He thought a while and admitted this was so. I helped him search himself, and he saw that in using the science of personal achievement he had taken the bit in his teeth, and was galloping beyond control. What the mind builds in imagination, the mind can indeed build in reality, but we speak of a mind in good balance. Discussing his affairs, he came to see that $250,000 would buy him what he really wanted. With that realization, the tense businessman he weighs an importer relaxed and said he felt much better. This story's sequel involves another of those coincidences I do not believe are really coincidences. Before this man returned to India, I helped him secure several contracts for the sale of American-made products in his homeland. His profit eventually amounted to just a little over $250,000. Money that benefits you most often comes from work that benefits you. In the last chapter one planted the idea that one can ensure that his money and property go to persons of his choice when he dies. Unlike death itself, the bequeathing of assets is a controllable circumstance. You are going to make money, and when you do, please be careful that such a bequest does not rob an inheritor of his peace of mind. That it has been said, and with reason, that a rich man's son often does not display the ability his father had. I believe that many rich men's sons are robbed of this ability because they inherit their father's money. By and large, the old man worked for his money. His money came to him side by side with the development of his insight, his ability, his knowledge of people and his knowledge of the world. Hugh is not given riches by his father, he was given riches by his work. Now let us look at the son. All his life he has lived in the midst of money and the many comforts which money buys, that he knows he is going to inherit great amounts of money, assuming that he does have the inherent willingness to work hard. What happens to that willingness? In many cases it is replaced by a willingness to get something for nothing, and thus he never learns one of the basic lessons of life. Great fortunes or modest fortunes are a blessing only when they are used in good part to benefit others. No father benefits his son when he robs him of initiative. No testator favors a beneficiary by making it unnecessary for him to work. You may wish to shield your inheritors from the meanness of poverty. Well and good. Beyond that, do not shield them from life with a wall of money. Let them have the priceless opportunity of building better lives with their own life-taught wisdom and their own constructive work. In my youth I worked as a secretary to a wealthy lawyer who had two sons somewhat older than myself. These youths attended the University of Virginia. It became my duty to make up for each of them a monthly check for $100 as spending money. In those days $100 would buy 3 or 4 times what it will today. How I envied those boys. When I had been in business college, learning how to earn me own living, I had often gone hungry because I literally did not have a cent in my pocket. I vividly recall standing in front of a store and longing for some apples which were priced 6 for a dime. At length I went in and sold the storekeeper on the idea of trusting me for the dime until I got through school and began to earn money. Such were my memories as I made out those magnificent monthly checks. By and by my employer's sons came home with their diplomas. They also came home conditioned to easy living and with little idea of what work is all about. Were they inherently as capable as their father? We shall never know. One of them was put into a good job in a bank his father owned, and another was made manager of one of his father's coal mines. 10 years later they had completely wrecked their father's fortune and his health as well. I no longer envy anyone, for envy is no part of peace of mind. As I look back, I am grateful that I had to undergo such experiences as negotiating a 10-cent long-term credit, and I am grateful that, when I began to earn money, my earning power became part of my self-fulfillment. I am even glad that when I made mistakes and lost money, I had no father to see me through, for I found a mighty teacher in adversity. My book Think and Grow Rich has been read by perhaps 7 million men and women. In the 20 years since it was published I have been able to talk to some of these people, and see that some have used the book to help them become truly rich. But some have used it to help them become rich in money only. It is time to set down once more the 12 great rich soft life. 1. A positive mental attitude. 2. Sound physical health. 3. Harmony in human relationships. 4. Freedom from all forms of fear. 5. The hope of future achievement. 6. The capacity for faith. 7. A willingness to share one's blessings. 8. A labor of love as an occupation. 9. An open mind on all subjects. 10. Self-discipline in all circumstances. 11. The capacity to understand others. 12. Sufficient money. These are the riches which can and should go along with peace of mind. Notice I have set money in the last place, and this despite my insisting that it is very difficult to have peace of mind without sufficient money. I set it there because you yourself will automatically give emphasis to money. Now and then, therefore, I must remind you to de-emphasize it and remember this. Money will buy a great deal but it will not buy peace of mind. It only will help you find peace of mind. But neither money nor anything else can help you find peace of mind unless you begin the journey from within yourself. Basic steps in building your income. I have been told that it is not good logic to warn people of the dangers of misusing money, when probably they do not have enough money to make them worry about misusing it. I would follow this advice if I were writing a book merely about how to earn money. This book also is concerned with showing you where you are going and how the world looks when you get there. It helps you build correct attitudes right at the start. As long as we have pointed firmly at those attitudes, however, as we shall point again, I shall set down some practical ways in which a person who has little or no capital can begin to build his wealth. Each of these ways is specific unto itself, so to speak, but is capable of almost infinite modification. It is up to you to pause as you read and apply these procedures to yourself, your talents, your surroundings and, above all, your goals. Point 1. Get other people to help their own businesses by helping yours. A young life insurance salesman was having trouble in placing policies with heads of families. Using this adversity as a springboard, he wondered why he could not sell insurance to the very same men, not in their role as heads of families but in their role as businessmen. After all, money taken out of the family budget is money gone, but a business expense offers an opportunity of bringing back the expended sum many times over. He began with a leading restaurant owner in his town. He pointed out to this man that he might very well advertise that the food he served was so wholesome and sustaining that people who ate in his restaurant were likely to live longer. The restaurateur said this was indeed so and he intended to make sure it always was so. Good, said the insurance man, and explained the rest of the plan. The restaurateur was to offer to insure the life of each regular customer for $1,000. Details were worked out and the offer made the restaurant's business boom. Needless to say, it helped the young insurance man that he extended the idea to a group of filling stations, to a large grocery and to others. I am not positive it was this man who originated the idea of adding life insurance to mortgages sought that the mortgage would be paid off if the purchaser died. Both certainly made good use of this angle as well. Now stop and think, how can you get other people to help their own businesses by helping yours, too? Show someone how he can get more for his money. Here we are not talking about setting yourself up as a business advisor, so that people seek you out to learn how they can get more for their money. We assume that the initiative must be ours. Here is how one man did it. Working at a low salary for a distributor of magazines, he took notice of many different kinds of printing. As with another man I have mentioned in this book, he noticed that many of the printing jobs could have been done with more taste and style. Now, this young chap was discovering that most jobs of any kind are not done as well as they could be. Take note of this, for a fortune can be made on the idea. The young man found out more about printing, then went to a large printing firm. He arranged to bring in printing jobs at a 10% commission. He then went to large users of printed matter and collected a great many samples, which he took home and studied, selecting 2 or 3 brochures which obviously needed improvement. He arranged with a freelance commercial artist to prepare a sample layout for each, on the promise of a fair fee if the job went through. An advertising copywriter who had spare time contributed his own talents on the same basis. Armed now with a good rough of an improved job, the young man took the brochures to the firms which had issued them and simply showed how much better they could be. Now, let us look into some of the practical psychology at work here. To begin with, a person or a company may go on almost forever with some condition or process or product that gets by. He may not realize he is merely getting by, or if he does, he is too busy or too lazy to do anything about it. Along comes someone who makes him dissatisfied with what he has and in the same moment shows him how to do better. Moreover, the work is all done for him. Why not take advantage of it? Now stop and think, how can you show someone how Hudson get more for his money? Extend that, how can you help someone get more for his money in such a way that he will thereafter depend on you to show him again and again, free. Bring producer and consumer together. The farmer used to have a tough time bringing his goods to market. Imagine an isolated farm in hilly country, on a road that was mostly mud, and with horse and wagon the only means of transportation. Still, the farmer had to bring his produce taut on, and so he did by hook or by crook. Everything in our economy intermeshes with everything else. As the automobile came in, roads had to be improved, and they were. Now the farmer could carry his goods 5 to 10 times the distance he used to and still get home the same night. Soon someone found he could set up marketing centers between towns, and draw on the increasing car traffic for customers, while the farmers were very glad to be a continued source of supply. Farmers used to depend on peddlers who came by perhaps twice a year, sometimes on foot with huge packs on their backs. Unrolling his pack on the kitchen table, the peddler would provide the farmer's wife with needles and the like, the farmer with tobacco and fish hooks, and above all, with news. How hungry people used to be for news. The peddlers invariably had more money than the farmers, for they performed the valuable function of bringing producer and consumer together. When the farmer wanted to sell or buy a horse, he often was assisted by a broker who helped both parties reach an agreement on price, then sealed the bargain by making them shake hands. The broker, too, generally made more money than the farmers because he brought producer and consumer together. Recently I read of complaints by shoppers in the Soviet Union. It seems they spend endless hours standing on line in front of separate, specialized food stores. Eventually they may adopt the American idea of bringing many producers and many consumers together in convenient supermarkets. Fortunes have been made in this revolution in merchandising, especially as supermarkets and their sprawling parking lots have moved into the suburbs and even far out into the country. Fringe benefits have come to many property owners who saw how to ride along with the trend that a woman lived alone on 20 poor acres which had mostly been taken over by scrub pine. At last she decided to sell the old homestead. Neighbors told her, sighing, that she would never get much for it. A local real estate man made her a pitiable offer. This woman, however, was one of those elderly, in years, people who never had seen any reason why her mind should not remain alert. She told herself that her farm must be good for something. She decided to spend 30 days in an intensive investigation of what rundown farms are good for. Before the end of that 30 days she had found she could sell it as a base for a riding stable, complete with pasture and pleasant riding trails, for twice what the real estate man had offered, but also she had studied several supermarkets in the area and had concluded that her farm would make a good supermarket site. She sold out finally to a supermarket for 5 times what the real estate man had offered. When roads were paved and transportation by automobile became so easy, it was predicted that the mail-order house would disappear. After all, why should a person buy from a catalog when he can buy from the store itself? Such firms as Sears, Roebuck and Montgomery Ward nevertheless continue to flourish, despite constant rises in postage rates. Thousands of mail-order businesses thrive on selling everything from postage scales with the new rates printed on them, to books, household furnishings, preserved and fresh food, vitamins, equipment for hobbies, boat supplies. The list is almost endless. Why is this so? Because times may change but universal needs always continue. Showing a person that he can write his name and address on an order form and drop it into the mail and be assured of prompt delivery of something he wants, continues to be a good way to bring producer and consumer together. Sometimes the producer sells directly to the consumer. Far more often the consumer buys from a middleman who assumes retail selling as his special function or from a manufacturer's representative. Now stop and think, how can you bring producer and consumer together? Some of the money you earn should stay with you. Certainly we have not exhausted the subject of making money. You may even feel that in giving the subject a once-over lightly treatment, I have not done justice to it. I suggest, however, that you reread the foregoing 3 items and see in how many ways you can relate yourself to them. They have a great universality. Stretch them, you need not be too literal, and you will find they cover a vast variety of business situations, a broad horizon of opportunities. Note that they have not been tied to any particular craft or skill. Since the fields mentioned are illustrative of many others, you will find it an interesting exercise to see how many incidents of your own affairs can be fitted into one or more of those 3 categories. If you will put aside your own work and see yourself as a consumer, you certainly will fit. We shall touch upon many other principles which help hardworking men make money. That we still are talking about money and peace of mind. Nobody who goes too deeply into debt can count on having peace of mind. You may have it for a time, but now and again the debt comes into your consciousness and you feel you are not quite your own master, somebody else owns a piece of you. I am not talking here of ordinary business credit without which business hardly could exist, but more of personal debts. Having some money laid away is a means of avoiding the uncertainty and often the embarrassment that goes with incurring a personal debt. But saving does more for you than merely make it possible to spend the money you save. Saving gives you the habit of gauging your money against your needs. It helps to remind you that money is good only because of what it can buy in goods and services, and again it helps you gauge what you need in the way of goods and services. The habit of saving does away with the habit of waste. A saving becomes a need. Through habit, many a man finds Hatsan live just as well as he did before, on the same salary, and this even if some prices have gone up. Why is this? Because he stops throwing away portions of his money on needless or frivolous items, he buys more carefully, he conserves his clothing and other possessions. He finds out how to make his money do its absolute most for him. And he does not do this by forcing himself into poverty for the sake of building his bank account. He continues to live at his general level and finds Hatsan save as well. What should you do with the money you save? There is no single answer that fits everyone, that I have seen and heard of a good many instances in which small saved sums, in one case as little as $200, were used as investments in small businesses of good promise. Some of these investments paid back many thousand%. Of course you cannot count on this, but bear in mind that an opportunity arose and a person who had saved was able to take advantage of that opportunity without borrowing, without obligating himself. That a young couple had formed the habit of buying, on time. They were always in debt. One day the wife calculated the amount they had paid out in interest and said, "Never again." The couple was about to give a party and needed a new bridgeable with 4 matching chairs. But the wife said they would play bridge sitting on the rug and incur no more debts. They called it Turkish bridge and had a hilarious good time. This experience caused them to put aside some friends who seemed unable to entertain without making a show, and cultivate friends who valued friendship more than display. Friends who turned out to be far more worth knowing. Also they began to save 1/10 of their income every week. One day they went shopping with money in their pockets and found out this great truth of merchandising: merchants sell for less when they sell for cash. In addition, the husband felt more relaxed and confident now that he was out of debt and also had a backlog of money. This helped him in his job. He was called in for an interview, during which his employer asked him casually if he saved money in any of the local banks. Just another way of asking, "Do you save money?" The young husband's confident and affirmative answer was the right answer, and he got a promotion which led to greater things. Saving is an index of character, for it has much to do with a man's sense of purpose and his ability to manage his affairs. That I once helped a man start saving even though he said it was absolutely impossible for him to do. First, we set up a goal. It was the purchase of a handsome sport jacket, a sensible purchase in that he could wear it in his business as well as during leisure hours. The price, which would not buy an equivalent jacket these days, was $24.95. Then I made this fellow set down every cent he spent for 2 weeks. We went over the list together. The conversation went something like this: can you give up 2 packs of cigarettes a week? Yes. Instead of spending 15 cents a day on a shoe shine, will you spend $1 on shoe shining equipment and shine your own shoes? And get a better shine for perhaps 2 cents? Yes. Will you spend no more than $1 on your lunch? No, I eat with people who like to eat heartily, and I told him about a lunch I had had with Henry Ford that I ordered a lobster salad for $3. The billionaire ordered a sandwich and his total bill was 85 cents. Mr. Ford was not an eccentric about economizing. He was just a big enough and peaceful enough man to feel he could eat while the wished. The man who could not save now said with determination, "I'll keep my lunch check down to $1. Yes. Well, by saying yes 3 times you've saved yourself at least $10 a week. $10 a week. He was astonished, then thoughtful. Without my having to oversee the process, he got himself out from under a great many other small, money-eating expenses that he found he now lived better in ways that counted, and he saved as well. Whether or not you are short of money, I suggest you fill in a list of your own. Think about expenses you can reduce or eliminate if you really want to. Set down the amounts per week, total them, think about that total, ask yourself what that sum could buy for you in 1 week, in 2 weeks, in a month, in a year. This experience is important. Here is a list to point the way, checking on Chapter 5, will you master money or will it master you? Once you earn a considerable surplus above your needs, you should enjoy both riches and peace of mind. You will have peace of mind if you have mastered money, but note if it has mastered you. Too many men use money merely for conspicuous consumption. Too many, having millions, live in fear of losing them. If money or anything else gets in the way of your peace of mind, take peace of mind and let the other go. Money that benefits you comes most often from work that benefits you. A man needs enough for comfort and for a good share of the world's luxuries. Aiming at these and retaining his self-confident faith in himself, instead of straining for many times more than he can spend, he often earns much more than he expected. No father benefits his son when he surrounds him with money and prevents him from learning life's great lessons through honest work. Keep your mind in Ali 12 of the great riches of life, and know that your journey toward riches must begin within yourself. Basic steps in building your income. One way to build income is to show others how they can help you succeed by advancing their own success. Another way is to show someone how he can get more for his money. Another is to bring producer and consumer together, which can be done in many ways. Always, some of the money you earn should stay with you. Debts can rob you of peace of mind. Saving is a habit which gives you many benefits besides money in the bank. How to start yourself in the saving habit. Almost anyone who is short of money can stop the drain off small, unnecessary spending. Doing this, you often find better and more interesting ways to enjoy life. You can live as well as before because you augment your ability to handle money. The ability to save is a good index of character, and employers know it. Make a list of every cent you spend on certain items, and you will open your eyes to the total you spend, a total which can be saved toward purchases which hitherto have seemed beyond your means, or kept as a means of taking advantage of low prices or investment opportunities. Point 6. The blessed art of sharing your riches. Wealth that is shared creates more wealth, and you can share many forms of wealth besides money. Today's millionaires themselves point out that anyone can become a millionaire because today's wealth is so widespread and gives rise to so many opportunities. When you share in your own home, you create a basic harmony which adds to your success and peace of mind in everything you do. Start now to share what you have, and when you have plenty of money you will share your money the more wisely and with greater benefit that you are going to make money. If you do not allow negative points of view to trip you up, you will march straight forward in the road to riches. Yes, you are going to make money, insolent sums, money that comes to you through your own worthy efforts, money you spend for your own worth, it desires money you spend in helping others. Will you build your character while you build your fortune? This, as by now you know, is not exactly another matter. There is a strong connection between the power to make money and the power to know your own mind and fulfill your own self as a fully realized person. Again, we shall examine a technique that goes with being rich and having invincible peace of mind. So far as sharing money is concerned, you may see this technique as belong to your future. So far as sharing other forms of wealth is concerned, this technique is yours right now. Use it and make it part of you. Life proceeds according to the great law of compensation. The more you give of what you have, the more comes back to you, and it comes back greatly multiplied. That he gave away 90% of his working hours. One of me distinguished students, Edward Choate of the New England Life Insurance Company of Los Angeles, decided to help his government sell war bonds during World War II. He devoted 80% of his time to this effort, for which he received no direct compensation. That in addition, he gave 10% of his time to counseling and training other life insurance men, his direct competitors. For this he neither asked nor received compensation. He used the remaining 10% of his time to sell life insurance on his own account. One might think that a man who gave away 90% of his working hours would ruin his business. Let us see. A life insurance man is considered to do pretty well if he writes $1,000,000 worth of insurance in a year. During the first 3 months of one war year, Edward Choate wrote more than $1,500,000 worth. Most of this was written in his own office, on the lives of men who sought him out and asked him to accept their applications. They were men who remembered him in connection with the services he rendered while he was giving away 90% of his time. That in giving of his time, Mr. Choate never hinted that he wanted anything in return. Yet such is the law of compensation that a return is inevitable. You may wish to look at it this way: every time you share your blessings with another, you become his creditor. Eventually, the debt is paid. Somehow, debts have to be paid. They gave away a philosophy and it returned manyfold. One of the most valuable gifts you can give any man is the gift of direction. Show him how to gather his forces and focus them the way he wants to go, and literally you do more for him than if you handed him $1 million. Andrew Carnegie gave away multiple millions for the purpose of founding free libraries, hoping thus to disseminate knowledge of all kinds and lift the entire knowledge level of a nation. Above and beyond this, he made available the science of personal achievement, in which I have played my own part. One of the greatest rewards of my life has been to see my book Think and Grow Rich given away as a means of spreading the philosophy. Mr. Choate is one of those who have given away hundreds of copies. Often he gives the book to men who by no stretch of the imagination ever will become prospects for life insurance. He gives the book to others because it helped him find himself. Undoubtedly it has brought him business. Undoubtedly it has helped many a man to be able to afford the life insurance he needs. Another student of mine moved to Oakland, California, with a total capital of less than $200. He invested half his capital in Think and Grow Rich. He made a practice of lending the book to his neighbors, asking only that each person keep the book 1 week. At the end of that time, he would pick up the book and lend it to some other person. Later he came to tell me what his habit of sharing his own philosophy had done for him. When I started to lend those books of yours, he said, I had no other purpose in mind than to make friends among my neighbors by introducing them to a philosophy which has Samic friendship in it. Meanwhile I had started my machine shop with one small drill press. Very soon, some of my neighbors who had read Think and Grow Rich began to spread the news of my shop and me philosophy of giving as much as I can, and business began to pour in. I never spent a cent in advertising. I never solicited a single order from anybody. At last report this man had $100,000 worth of equipment in his shop and had grossed more than $1 million. He said, it beats anything I ever heard of in my whole life. But you hear of it when your ear becomes attuned to the great art of giving. It is not a new idea. The great philosophers of all times have pointed out the riches we gain when we give away some of our wealth of money, of time, of service, of unpremeditated moments of kindness, and especially of love, giving to those who help themselves. Any man noted for his millions receives endless requests for money. He knows that most of these appeals come from people who will not use the money for necessities, let alone in any manner which helps them in their careers. He cannot hope to screen all such requests. Often it is far simpler for him to give large sums to a charity or to endow a foundation. Those who have worked for their money know that the virtue of money consists in its use, not in its quantity. This is equally true whether the amount be a dime or $1,000,000. Henry Ford once was approached by Miss Martha Berry of the Martha Berry School in Georgia. Miss Berry asked for an endowment for her school, but Mr. Ford refused the request. "Well," she countered, "will you give us a sack of peanuts?" Mr. Ford obliged by buying her a sack of raw peanuts. With the aid of her students, mountain boys and girls, Miss Berry planted and replanted the peanuts, selling the crop until she had converted the original sack into $600 in cash. She then returned to Mr. Ford and handed him the $600, saying, "You see how practical we are in the use of money." Mr. Ford handed back the $600, along with some $2 million to build the fine stone buildings which now adorn the campus of the Martha Berry School in Berry, Georgia. Del Mar. Ford made very few gifts of this kind. Experience had taught him that all too often gifts to schools are handled by impractical people who know very little about sound business, or farming, methods. As long as Martha Berry lived, the Ford private car appeared on the railroad siding near her school once a year, while Mr. and Mrs. Ford paid a visit. A present-day multimillionaire, Henry Crown, who arrived in this country as a poor immigrant from Lithuania, is now a leading figure in the vast General Dynamics Corporation. Mr. Crown has put a great deal of money into a plan which teaches aspiring young people how to handle capital. He has set up a fund of $8,000 at a good many colleges, and this money is invested each year by the senior economics class. When the class makes a profit, its members share the surplus, and the fund is passed on intact to the next class. Wealth creates wealth. A large sum of money in the hands of one man generally does not create as much wealth as does money which circulates, provided that those who handle its circulation are interested in creating wealth. A man's happiness and peace of mind depend on his sharing all kinds of wealth. Business relations cannot properly be described as a relationship of love between buyer and seller, yet when the idea of service to one's fellow men comes into the relationship, much that is profitable to both parties also enters in. "A little bit of myself," said Henry Ford, "goes into every automobile that rolls off our assembly lines, and I think of every automobile we sell, not in terms of the profit it yields us, but in terms of the useful service it may render the purchaser." Thomas A. Edison said, "I never perfected an invention that it did not think about in terms of the service it might give others." The idea that a business should give its customers more than a product for a price is not new, and history proves it creates both good businesses and good customers. Good relations between an industrial employer and his employees, however, are not very old as history goes. This is natural enough when we consider that enterprises which employ people by the thousand have not been with us more than a few generations. They are a great way for the owner of the business to make money, and unfortunately many a labor force has been badly treated in the process. In past years we had our own era of those industrial pirates who never thought of sharing with their employees the wealth their employees helped to create. While they made a great show of their money in New York, Newport or Palm Beach, those men would have sneered at the idea that a society needs a large number of well-paid people who are able to buy more goods and lead better lives. Millionaires are far more numerous today. More than 5,000 new millionaires have so declared themselves on their tax returns in the last decade. Also, as I have mentioned, today's millionaires do not seem to want the notice that rich men used to require. Most of my readers will not recognize the names of some of the present-day millionaires and multimillionaires I have cited, nor do today's moneyed men seem anxious to form a definite class to which the poor may not aspire. I quote Arthur Desio, who made so much money in building and selling mobile homes, "It's easier to get ahead than it was 15 or 40 years ago. Look at the population growth and the tremendous rise in personal income. This country is just loaded with opportunities." So it is, and many of the opportunities would not exist if wealth were not better distributed than it used to be. Employers have seen the value to themselves, to their people and to society of taking workers into partnership with industry. A capitalist society proves over and over that it is the best way to create maximum, widespread wealth. A victory for the science of personal achievement. The Letourneau Company is a large employer. Some years ago I received a phone call from a former student who had become one of its executives. "Please come to see us immediately," he said. "We have a difficulty which only you can handle." When I arrived at the Letourneau plant I learned that communistic influences had entered in the guise of a labor union. The company wanted help in immunizing its employees against this schism, knowing that if the crisis could be surmounted the men would realize which way of life was best for them. They asked me my fee. "Perhaps there will be no fee," I replied. "Give me freedom to act, and if I cannot overcome your trouble there will be no charge. If I succeed in eliminating the communistic influences, I will tell you later what my charge will be." The deal was closed on that basis. I set up a cot in the plant and I stayed on duty day and night. The basic trouble was twofold. The men did not realize, first, how the company returned to them part of the wealth they created, and also few individuals had any idea of their own power to take their own abilities and multiply them through the exercise of a positive mental attitude. Fear of poverty and other crippling fears ran rampant among them, belief in wealth and happiness, and in each man's power to win his own wealth and create his own happiness, had been pushed aside by negative thinking. Given this ground in which to sow their seeds of discord, the communist-minded organizers were able to make those men believe that their future should be in the hands of others, that they should reduce themselves to cogs in a kind of economic machine, that indeed it was wrong for a man of faith and ambition to rise where negative-minded men might not follow. That in combating the communists I never mentioned them, rather, I taught the science of personal achievement, and that was all I needed to teach. In a short time the Letourneau employees saw how much greatness each man has within his own mind, a greatness nobody else can or should handle for him. They saw what it really means to work and the rewards work brings to a man who has some goal besides 3 meals a day and really wants to achieve his ambition. They came to see that the rich men of their time owned no natural power which they themselves did not own, and all they had to do was to find their powers for prosperity and use them. That I succeeded. When I named my compensation, I received it immediately. 8 months later the company increased my fee. Thus it goes when men realize that wealth is not something you grab from another, it is something you build for yourself out of service to others, sparked and enhanced by your own positive, joyful inward drive. This is true wealth and part of peace of mind. I do not know how many of those Letourneau men became rich, but I know they had reason to bear in mind the true picture of wealth and share it with others, sharing the wealth in your own home. You can tell a great deal about a man by what goes on in his home. Men who are successful in living, not merely in mastering the mechanics of some trade, generally maintain homes in which no one person has to be boss, and there is true love and true sharing. That I have been in the homes of rich men whose wives had to beg them for money enough to buy needed articles of clothing. That I have been in the homes of poor men in which every purchase had to be discussed lest it leave no money for food, and the poor home was the happier because of its atmosphere of sharing, even though the lack of money was sadly felt. That I have at times been asked to give marriage counseling, and at times I have recommended that a marriage be broken. There are many reasons for such a recommendation, and I assure you the reasons are not trifling. I have noticed in such cases that lack of the ability to share invariably shows itself. Let non-sharing take hold at any level, in any aspect of married life, and it leads to other troubles. You are going to make money, and when you do, make sure that your wife has a fund of her own to spend as she wishes. It will not be her fund in the sense that it is sacrosanct, for if you meet financial misfortune she will share this as well in a good and loving marriage. It will be her money in the sense that it is your recognition of your wife as a person in her own right, your partner, not your servant. That I am informed that much of the chatter that goes on in beauty parlors has to do with the clever ways in which women get money out of their husbands. Not a few must resort to slipping a few dollars out of his pocket while he sleeps. Others invent charities, or dream up school expenses for the children. Apparently, many a woman is literally forced into such tactics if she is to maintain a decent home, for her husband shows no willingness to shell out more than enough for a mere subsistence. If that. On the other hand, many a woman in the sanctity of hairdrying row reveals she has lost her grocery allowance in playing mahjong or in some similar pursuit, and she cannot admit this to her husband. The sum lost is rarely large, and mahjong is not wicked. It is the lack of frankness with her husband that is the truly damaging condition. If you knew how angry my husband can get, such a woman often says, you'd know why I can't tell him. So it takes two to create the bad situation. Add to this the fact that many husbands never tell their wives how much they earn or how much they may spend on drinks or how much they lose at poker. By and large, when a man shows he is willing to share, a woman by her nature is eager to share lovingly with him. High in the list of information a man should share with his wife is the knowledge of how much money he makes and how he acquires his money. Women generally stay at home or close to home while a man is out somewhere earning money. When a man comes home from his job, a woman likes him to bring with him some of the outside world. It is a smart man who sees to it that his wife gets a blow-by-blow description of all he does, and where he spends his time, without her having to ask for this information. There are sexual overtones in this, for a wife may work up jealousy for no reason, especially if a man has a job which does not keep him constantly at a desk or a bench within sight of others. Share and you have a marriage. Avoid sharing and you might as well be living alone. Think back upon the 9 basic motives we discussed in a previous chapter. To refresh your memory, they are 7 positive motives. 1. The emotion of love. 2. The emotion of sex. 3. The desire for material gain. 4. The desire for self-preservation. 5. The desire for freedom of body and mind. 6. The desire for self-expression. 7. The desire for perpetuation of life. AFTRDATH. 2 negative motives. 1. The emotion of anger and revenge. 2. The emotion of FR. It has been said that the first 3 basic motives, love, sex and money, practically rule the world. I would not say this statement is entirely true, but there is a great deal of truth in it. A man who has not truly shared all of his life with the woman of his choice cannot know the magic of sex and love in their most sublime combination. But when a man lives with these motives, he often connects them like a mighty dynamo to the third. He makes more and more money so that he may share more and more of life's abundance with his wife. No part of your existence can be lived separately from all the other parts. When you are successful in one area, it helps you to be successful in all other areas. Most especially, when you have peace of mind at home, you can count on having peace of mind everywhere. I'll tell a little story about, or perhaps on myself. There was a time in my life when changing a flat tire upset me completely. Now, if a flat occurs on one of my long drives across the wide open parts of our country, I change the tire and am not in the least upset. In former years I had more muscle, but in former years, I did not drive with the woman of my choice beside me, as I do today. Everyone has something to share and gains by sharing it. When a stranger stops you in the street and asks directions, you share your knowledge when you tell him. You do not have to be rich in money in order to do this. If you are really rich in human kindness, you will give the stranger a very careful explanation, and perhaps walk to the next corner with him and point out the way. The poorest of us has much to share. In some ways a poor man has as much to share as does a rich man. Certainly it is so with love and with kindness. That I shall suggest 3 general ways of sharing which are available to almost anybody. You may not make use of the particular instances used as examples, but the list will serve to pen your mind to the many possibilities of sharing more than money. Share your special skills or knowledge. Many of us possess some special skill or knowledge which helps us earn money. We are used to selling our skill. Now look for a way to give that skill without thought of gain. A much-needed clubhouse for boys was built in the slum section of a large city. The basic construction costs were provided by a large foundation, but the clubhouse never would have gotten started were it not for those who gave their skills. A lawyer volunteered his services in drawing up the incorporation papers and other necessary documents. A carpenter installed locker room partitions. A painter gave his own services and also supervised a volunteer crew which painted the entire interior in cheerful colors. A mason installed a concrete ramp at one entrance so that physically handicapped boys could make their way in. Point 2. Share by filling a gap where you see one. Mr. A loaned his lawn mower to his new neighbor, Mr. B, who had not had time to equip himself. This was the beginning of excellent good neighbor relations between the two families, but for a while it seemed as though matters were going the other way. After Mr. B had trimmed his lawn, he returned the lawnmower with a big chip in one blade. Noticing this, Mr. R remarked diplomatically that Mr. B must have had some rocks hidden in his grass which chipped the blade. The new neighbor said gruffly that the blade had been chipped when he had been offered the use of the lawn mower, and walked away. Since the chip was fresh and shiny, this hardly could have been so. Mr. A said nothing more, however. He limited his contacts with his new neighbor to mere nods if he met him in the street. One day, Mr. B came around with a brand new lawn mower and handed it to Mr. A. "I want you to have this," Mr. B said. "You see, I knew I'd broken that blade but I couldn't afford to have it fixed right then. I guess I should have said so, but, well, I didn't. Now things have turned out all right and I want to do more than merely have the blade fixed." Thus is many a non-money debt returned with interest. Far more valuable than the lawn mower itself, however, was the atmosphere of cordiality which the two families found from then on. Point 3. Share recognition and appreciation. Notice how often you are recognized as being in a certain role, for example, the role of a customer, and so you are treated in a certain way. Now turn around the situation and recognize the other person. You will find it is a limitless form of sharing. For example, you may stop your car at a filling station on a hot day. The attendant rushes up, mopping his brow, anxious to give you prompt service. You recognize him as a person who has his own problems and you say, "Take it easy. It's too hot to hurry." He will remember you the next time you drive in, say you are an employer or a foreman. One of your men does exceptionally good work. Many an employer or foreman would observe that the man is paid to do a good job, so what? A wiser supervisor will make a point of telling a worker that his good performance has been noticed. When a person does a good job, he is favorably disposed toward anyone who gives him recognition. Furthermore, he will try thereafter to keep his work up to a high standard. You will offer many a kindness, you will perform many a free service, and in many cases you will see no return. Bear in mind there is always a return within yourself, for when you give of yourself you make yourself bigger. And remember the law of compensation, which always works in your favor when you arrange it so. We shall look more deeply into the wonders of compensation later on. Look for ways to share your wealth. Never ask, "What wealth?" In sharing, you will find you are wealthier than you think. Share more than money, and when you have plenty of money you will be more closely attuned to human needs and your money will give added benefit to those who share it. The supreme secret is like a half-hidden treasure you may pass 100 times a day without noticing, yet you see it from the corner of your eye. Checking on Chapter 6, the more you give, the more comes back to you. Even a man who gave away 90% of his working time became richer thereby. When you share your blessings with another, you become his creditor and eventually the debt is paid. You also can share direction in the form of a philosophy which leads to peace of mind and great wealth. Giving to those who help themselves is a highly constructive kind of giving. Wealth creates wealth when a buying and selling relationship contains the idea of service to one's fellow men. Both sides benefit. Many early industrial employers took all they could from their employees and returned as little as possible. Today wealth is more widespread and this helps create more opportunities. A millionaire no longer attempts to make a great display of wealth. There are increasing numbers of millionaires, and rich men no longer see themselves as a class apart. As you create your own wealth you can create your own happiness. Many people who work for others do not realize the extent to which they share the wealth they create, nor how they can create endless wealth in their own lives through the power of a positive mental attitude. Rich men have non-natural powers denied to poor men. Every man carries his greatness within his own mind, and it is he himself, and not an outside power, who is the only one who can bring forth his greatness. Sharing the wealth in your own home. Men who are successful in living generally maintain love and sharing in their own homes. When couples do not share, other troubles arise. When a man shows he is willing to share, a woman is eager to share with him. Point 3. Basic motives, love, sex, and money, are said practically to rule the world, and this can be seen in many cases. No part of your life can be lived separately from the other parts. Everyone has something to share. You can share knowledge, you can share love and kindness no matter how poor you may be. Almost anyone can share in 3 areas which offer themselves over and over. You can share your special skills or knowledge, you can share by filling a gap when you see one, you can share recognition and appreciation of others and the work they do. 7. How to develop your own healthy ego. All your ability and personality show themselves in your ego. For many a man the ego works always at full power and for some it needs restraining. For most, it is as well to find and use some ego-boosting device. Your own ego booster may be connected with the way you dress, the way you express yourself, how to develop your own healthy ego. 91 Your surroundings, some object which has symbolic value or in some other way which has a special, individual meaning. The ego can be attuned to mysterious forces beyond one's self. Through your ego you can be guided toward an expression of yourself which reflects in your increased prosperity. I have spoken before and shall speak again on the need for knowing your own mind and going in your own direction. Now let us look at the ego, that invaluable mind spark plug which my dictionary defines as the self-assertive tendency of man. People who have peace of mind also have healthy egos. Now, to sum the term healthy ego brings to mind the picture of a loud, backslapping type of person. This may be so, but it is not necessarily so. Your ego as you reflect it to the world has been built for many years out of childhood influences, later influences and a great many other factors. Your ego is as individual as your fingerprints, and what is healthy to you will not be healthy for another man. Often ego seems to have a bit of vanity in it, but it is far stronger and far more subtle than ordinary human vanity. Think of your ego as an invisible part of yourself which makes you strong and resourceful, or puts obstacles in your way, according to the sort of influence you feed it. Even the greatest of minds now and then find themselves with a run-down ego. Truly great men feel this, and quickly restore their egos. The purpose of this chapter is to show you some of the surprisingly straightforward ego boosters which others have used, and to give you an assortment out of which you may choose and perfect a tailor-made ego booster of your own, the ego that was stronger than a clean shirt and ashave. It is old advice and good advice to say that being well-dressed and well-groomed gives a boost to your ego. Now I want you to meet a man who knew that very well but whose deeply abiding ego was strong enough to rise above a clean shirt and a shave. The impact of this story will be stronger if I tell it in sequence as it came to me. It begins with my meeting Edwin C. Barnes when he was Thomas Edison's business associate. Mr. Barnes at that time owned 31 expensively tailored suits and in the course of a month never wore one suit 2 days in a row. His shirts were made to order out of the most expensive fabrics available. His ties were made to order in Paris and cost at least $25 a piece. One day I suggested jokingly to Mr. Barnes that he let Mech know when he was ready to discard some of his suits so that he might wear them. "I know you are kidding," Barnes said, "but you might like to know that at the time I decided to associate myself with Thomas Edison, I didn't have the railroad fare to take me to East Orange, New Jersey, where I had to go to sell him the idea. My desire to get there was greater than my fear of the humiliation I would suffer by riding a freight train. I packed a suitcase. It didn't take long and I traveled by boxcar. When I walked into Mr. Edison's office and said I wanted to see him, I heard a titter of laughter all over the place. Finally his secretary consented to let me see Mr. Edison. As soon as I faced the great inventor I started telling him how fortunate he was that I was giving him the first chance at my services. After I'd talked a while, he rose, walked all around me, looked me over with penetrating eyes, grinned and asked, "What did you come to see me about, young man?" That's how I discovered he was hard of hearing. Now I had to explain myself all over, loudly. My clothes were wrinkled and dusty, my shoes were scuffed, I had a 2 days' growth of beard, and I almost lost my courage. It is to Mr. Edison's credit that he did not judge me by my appearance, but I made up my mind, then and there, that never again would I stand before any man without knowing that I was better dressed than he. Now you see why I have all these clothes. And as far as my giving you my discards is concerned, I doubt if you would get from them the same ego boost they give me. He was right. I never have felt the need to bolster my ego by personal adornment, and I too am right, for ego is a strictly personal matter. During the early part of my career it did stimulate my ego with that large estate and those elegant cars. Later, when my work became widely accepted, I became content with a much simpler style of living. Yet I do not neglect my ego, which functions through my princes of guidance. Still, just like Mr. Barnes and so many others, I see myself reflecting long ago experiences which I no longer wish to suffer. During my childhood I lived amid poverty and illiteracy, surrounded by poverty-stricken neighbors. Now I am very sensitive to the feel of any neighborhood in which I live, and it must be just right. I even inspect the approaches to my home to make sure they do not lead through any unpleasant areas. You may find it instructive to look back at the early influences of your own life and see how much they may have to do with your actions now. Here are some questions to get you started. Think a while after each to make sure you have found the right answer. As a child, did you have sufficient food, clothing, and shelter? If the answer is no, was it insufficient by any reasonable standard or insufficient by some neighborhood or other standard by which you have come to judge? Did your parents, or someone else who had influence in your life, tend to belittle you and make you feel that your brothers and sisters or playmates were better or smarter than you? Were you called basically bad when you misbehaved, or were your actions merely labeled as unacceptable? If you were bad by definition, did you decide you were going to live up to your badness? Did you have sufficient schooling in the 3 R's so that you never had to feel inferior? Later, about your reading, writing, and arithmetic, are you too short, too tall, or too fat, so that you feel conspicuous? Are you exceptionally ill-favored as to appearance, or scarred or crippled? How would you describe the general atmosphere in your childhood home? Peaceful, antagonistic, clouded by worry, cheerful, carelessly happy-go-lucky? Did your parents quarrel in your presence? Were you conscious of people using you as an easy mark or a push-around? Were you fond of being the leader in games and clubs? Did you set up a symbol of success early in life, such as a big house like Mr. Jones's, or a job traveling to glamorous places like Mr. Brown's? Did your parents encourage you to accept responsibility, or were they over-anxious to do everything for you? Were you forced to be so much on your own that you never felt you had anyone who really cared what happened to you? Thinking about such questions will suggest many facets of your past which show themselves in your present actions. I do not suggest you worry about your past. Remember, when we close the door on the past, we close out a great deal which otherwise might hamper us. At times, however, an understanding of past influences helps you to appreciate and enjoy your present ways of bucking up your ego. A salesman sells through his ego. While I was engaged in organizing the science of personal achievement, I made my living by training salesmen. More than 30,000 men and women came under my guidance while they were being trained to sell. The first thing I taught my students was that before any salesman sells anything to anyone, he first must sell it to himself. That is, he must so condition his own ego that it is in shape to strengthen his statements, and he must believe that both he and his product are good. An executive of the New York Life Insurance Company gave me an interesting case. One man had been with the company more than 30 years, and had maintained a high selling record. Suddenly his production dropped to almost nothing. The salesman could not tell what was wrong, and neither could the company executives. They called me in to doctor the patient. I went out with this salesman to observe him in action. Soon I noticed that his basic trouble, after 30 years in the field, was the fear that he had grown too old for selling. He talked constantly about his age. His fear had developed into hypochondria, and he felt he must use a walking stick to help him get around. Somehow he had persuaded himself that he didn't have it any longer, and so he expected to be rebuffed. He had allowed his ego to become so thoroughly subdued that he anticipated "no" before he ever heard it, and that is the best way to make sure it is said. Back in the office I said to this man, "I want you to go out and find one of those old-fashioned ear trumpets which once were used by the hard of hearing." He protested, "But I am not hard of hearing." "That's right," I said. "You hear too well. You hear the note for it is said. Now, I want you to simulate deafness. Place the trumpet at your ear when anyone speaks, pretend you didn't hear him, and when he says no, go right ahead with your sales talk." We agreed that he could not sell life insurance to someone who really did not need it or want it, so nobody would be hurt. That he found a monstrous old hearing trumpet and took it with him in his rounds. In his first week as a trumpet user he procured applications from 6 out of 9 prospective buyers. The next week he came back with 8 applications out of 12 interviews, an almost unheard of record. His ego restored today's habit, he put away the trumpet and had no trouble thereafter. Although my own hearing is fine, I seem often to come into contact with hearing troubles. My son, Blair, was born without ears. How I helped nature give him sufficient hearing is another story. I am thinking now of the time when we sent him to a public school wearing his hair long enough to hide the absence of ears. The other children made fun of his long hair, which was damaging to his ego. We promptly had his hair cut short, but first I sold Blair the idea that his affliction would be a great benefit to him when people understood about it. And that is exactly what happened, for people now were kind to him. He soon lost all self-consciousness about being different from people who have ears. Perhaps I was inspired by Thomas A. Edison's determination to make an asset out of his deafness rather than a liability that I never saw him wear an expression of annoyance or disappointment. Rather, his expression clearly said, "My ego is under my control and it does my bidding without fear or limitation." Your ego and your opulence. As with the ear trumpet, I have on many occasions been able to prescribe exactly the right ego builder for a particular person. It requires knowing the person, of course, and when you wish to prescribe for yourself, you will see the importance of that ancient, great advice, know thyself. Now and again a man will stop working before he should and find himself at loose ends. This was the case with a former student of mine named Ray Cunliffe. He had owned a Cadillac agency in Chicago, which he sold at a handsome profit. Since he now had plenty of liquid assets, he decided to take a year and play around and rest up, as he put it. Before the year was out he grew restless. He looked around for a good Cadillac franchise, but found none. Another 6 months passed and he began to eat deeply into his cash reserve for living expenses. About that time he joined a class in the science of personal achievement which I was teaching in Baltimore. Ray and his wife had been accustomed to having servants in their home. Now they had to let the servants go and do their own housework. One day while Ray was in the basement doing the family laundry, it occurred to him that he was making the very mistake I had mentioned at a recent lesson. He wasn't nourishing his ego. He was starving it, beating it down. That in his excitement and anxiety he came to me for personal help. He told me his story, then asked, "Where do I go from here?" He had told me that for several years his wife had wanted a mink coat which would cost some $3,000. Also I could see that although he drove a Cadillac it was beginning to look shabby, and so did the clothes he wore. So I said, "Ray, get out your notebook and pencil while I give you a prescription for opulence. Number 1, go to the nearest Cadillac agency, trade in your present car and buy a new car of the model you like best. Number 2, go to the best fur store in town and buy your wife a fine mink coat, even if it costs more than $3,000. Number 3, go to your tailor and have a complete wardrobe of suits made up. Then buy the ties and shirts and shoes you need to go with your new suits. Number 4, have the mink coat done up in gift wrapping. Place the package in your new Cadillac, hire a livery chauffeur, and while you are not at home have the chauffeur drive the car to your house and deliver it and the package to your wife. Take these 4 steps immediately. Then come back for the next prescription, that is, if you need another. This one prescription may turn the tide very quickly. When the new Cadillac and the mink coat arrived at Ray's home, his wife at first refused to accept them. The chauffeur merely handed her the car keys and walked away, leaving the car in the driveway with the coat on its seat. Ray's wife finally tried on the coat. Sure enough, it was the very coat she had tried on out of curiosity and longing a few weeks earlier. Suddenly she felt a surge of confidence and happiness. The same thing was happening to Ray. Now, what one have to tell you seemed like magic to him, and it may seem like magic to you, but it was not magic. The cook and the housemaid who formerly worked for the Cunliffes showed up and asked if they might return to their old jobs. Without the slightest hesitation, Mrs. Cunliffe told them to come right in. As for Ray himself, a friend phoned him and said, "I hear that the Baltimore Cadillac agency can be bought. You might look it over." Ray looked it over and saw it was good. The deal required $150,000, however, which was quite a sum for him to raise on short notice. His ego had lifted itself out of the doldrums. He said, "I don't know who is going to let me have the money, but one know that one shall get it." The following day he called on a man he had been avoiding, a wealthy man toward whom he had begun to feel inferior. No inferiority marred his approach now, as he explained he needed $150,000 to put himself back into business. "Fine," was the answer. "I'm glad to see you getting back into the business where you always made money." He wrote Ray a check for $150,000 and added, "You can pay this back year by year as your profits come in." So Ray Cunliffe was back in a Cadillac agency of his own and doing a good business almost before he had had time to wear all his new shirts. He had only one disappointment. He was disappointed that one did not show surprise over his sudden turn of fortune. "Well, Ray," one said, I can't get excited over something one have seen happen hundreds of times. But one was pleased, of course, to see once more that poverty consciousness can be replaced by success consciousness, which invariably draws success as though with an all-powerful magnet. Ego is the key to this, an ego filled with self-confident faith, and bolstered by the means that it is right for you. You can paint an ego picture of yourself and use it for first aid. Sometimes a man faces a single situation on which a great deal depends. Often such a situation involves another person who must in some way be persuaded, for whom some situation must be made attractive. When you know that other person, often you can use the power of your ego to give him the picture he wants to see. Even when you do not know him personally, you often can look closely at the values of the situation and come up with a picture that is attractive to him. Let us now look at myself at a stage in my career when my ego faltered. That I have told how I was associated with Don Mellett, the newspaper publisher, and how his murder forced the postponement of publication of my first manuscripts. Also how it saved me from wearing a big business label. As I related, I had to get out of town to hide from the thugs who believed I had been involved in the attacks upon their illegal rum running. In the time I spent hiding, my spirits were not good. I came close to losing my faith in my ability to carry out the great task Andrew Carnegie had assigned me some 20 years before. That I took hold of myself and decided to break the bondage off here. I would find a new publisher. Since Judge Gary had died, I had to start from scratch, not an easy task for the unknown author of a trailblazing work. As my ego rebuilt itself and my success consciousness reasserted itself, an insistent inner voice began to tell me that I would find my publisher in Philadelphia. I knew no publisher in that city, but the inner voice became so strong that on a capital of $50 I got into my car and headed toward the Quaker City, half believing I would find the solution to my problem, half believing I was going mad. Once in Philadelphia, I began to look through a classified telephone directory. I hoped to find a cheap boarding house where I could stay for a couple of dollars a day. Now, follow closely what happened, for this story is one of the most startling you ever may read, and it contains, besides its revelation of the power of ego, a revelation of the supreme secret that can transform your life. As I turned the pages of the directory, that inner voice spoke again. It said, "Never mind looking for a cheap boarding house. Go to the best hotel in the city and register for the best suite offerings in the house." I closed the book and blinked my eyes. I had less than $35 in my pocket. But the command was so irresistible that I picked up my luggage, marched to the best hotel in town and took a suite which cost $25 a day. The moment I signed the register, I knew I had done the right thing. My ego and my faith swelled within me. I could not then have put the supreme secret into words, but I know it took hold of me. A quarter was a good tip for a bellhop in those days, but I'd asked the boy $1. No sooner had I seated myself in one of the luxurious chairs than the inner voice spoke once more. You were restrained from registering in a cheap rooming house because such an environment would have placed you at a great disadvantage in dealing with a publisher. Right now you need an ego booster, and you are getting it from this finely appointed suite of rooms. Now your mind can conceive on a positive plane that brings success. Ready? Call into your consciousness the name of every person you know who has the financial means to publish your works. When the right name appears, you will recognize it. Get in touch with that person and tell him what you desire. Without a shred of doubt, in perfect faith, I began to review the names of men who would be able to finance the world's first practical science of personal achievement. After 3 hours of this my mind went blank. Then a name popped into my mind with such compelling effect that I knew this was the man I wanted. He was Albert Lewis Pelton of Meriden, Connecticut. All I knew about Mr. Pelton was that he had published a book called Power of Will, and that he had advertised this book in my Golden Rule magazine several years previously. Immediately I wrote to Mr. Pelton by special delivery. I informed him that I was about to confer upon him the honor of publishing The Science of Personal Achievement. 2 days later I received a telegram saying Mr. Pelton was on his way to Philadelphia to see me. I shall never forget the expression on his face when he was ushered into my suite, nor the words he uttered. Well, an author who can live in a suite of rooms like this must be the real McCoy. The manuscript was about the size of an old-fashioned family Bible. It contained 1,800 pages, and weighed about 7 pounds. I handed it to Mr. Pelton and he sat down and turned through the pages. After about 20 minutes he closed the book and laid it on the table. He said, "I will publish this philosophy and pay you the regular author's royalty." We sent for a typewriter and he typed the contract. At one point he said, "I suppose you'd like an advance on your royalties? I'll make out a check right now." I replied nonchalantly, holding fast to the image my ego had built, "Oh, make it any amount you care to." $500. Okay. Some months later the first published set of my work, The Law of Success in 8 volumes, was presented to me. Those had been successful months in many ways, for I had regained the power of a positive point of view. I hope sincerely that those who read this story will not have to win their own positive points of view the long way around, as I did, had I been guided by some unseen power. I believe some outside force was guiding me. I believe that a mind attuned to currents of faith is attuned beyond its own physical dimension. Later in this book I shall relate another experience of Theisert, actually the experience which resulted in my writing this book after nearly 70 years of getting ready. Since that eventful day in 1928, I have helped tens of thousands of men and women to rehabilitate their egos. Most of them I never have met, for our minds contacted each other through the pages of my books. Through my lectures and personal lessons I also have helped many thousands to find the same key to the conceptual and achieving powers of the mind, and here in many cases I had the gratification of seeing it happen that I have developed a considerable ability to gauge people's needs in this direction and to press the right button, so to speak. But what takes place when the button is pressed? Whence comes the power that revitalizes a faltering ego? What is it that turns a mind from no to yes and so opens great gates of accomplishment? I still am seeking that answer. Perhaps the knowledge has been reserved for me to uncover as a sort of postgraduate course in my own work, for I never shall be finished with learning. Look for your own ego booster and you will find it. There are amazing varieties of ways to boost the ego. Although they may be mysterious in their inmost essence, their outward manifestations are clear to see. Consider the following examples. They are universal in their application and may help you find your own. Among the successful insurance men I have trained is one among many who drives an expensive car. His ego booster is more individual. It consists of a handsome golf bag and set of clubs he carries in full view in his car, that he thus carries with him the impression both for himself and for others that he spends considerable time playing golf and is always ready to drive to the links. I do not know if Hugh would be as successful as he is if he did not always display this intimation of success, but I do know that he gets exactly what he needs as an ego booster. Another successful insurance agent I trained wears an 8-carat diamond ring which seems to serve as his magic wand as talks to prospects. This man is one of the largest producers for the Massachusetts Mutual Life Insurance Company. Once he took his diamond ring to a jeweler for a new mounting. The job required a few days. During those days he worked harder than usual, used every persuasive argument he always had used in order to write a policy, and yet failed to make a sale. He said that when he began to talk to a prospect would look down for his ring, the ring was not there and somehow he could not put himself over. When the ring was back on his finger this man went to work as usual, and out of his first 6 interviews he received 6 applications for insurance, a record he never had made before. As for myself, if I were caught in public with such a searchlight on my finger, I would feel so self-conscious that I would get in my own way and be unable to command my ego. Touch his own, and a mighty power comes to the man who knows himself. When a man comes to himself, discovers his ego and takes possession of it, the fact is revealed to the whole world. It is reflected in the tone of his voice, in his facial expression, in the lift of his motions, in the clarity of his thought, in the definiteness of his purpose, in a positive mental attitude that brings out in others the desire to believe in and work with this man. Friend, when you become commander-in-chief of that very core of your mind, your ego, you are master of all you survey. You never will want, because you will unhesitatingly find the way to plenty. You never will fear, because your mind will not contain fear. You will be free, gloriously free, living a life that pays you in your own terms. Some few there are who need reins upon their egos. They are so rare, however, that we need not write any part of this book for them. A healthy ego is a means of health and peace of mind beyond comparison. Look, then, for the one right method or object or condition which helps you to fulfill yourself in the self-assertive tendency of man. Study the ways of any successful, happy people you know. Chances are that they possess and use the supreme secret. Checking on Chapter 7, What It Means to Have a Healthy Ego. Your ego is the mind power which helps you project yourself and your desires. It can make you strong and resourceful, or put obstacles in your way, according to the sort of influence you feed it. We are familiar with the ego-boosting power of being well-dressed, but a strong ego can rise above any limitation. When a man can afford to assert his ego in the ways he prefers, these ways often reflect long-ago influences. A salesman sells through his ego. A good salesman knows that he is good and his product is good, and this confidence rarely falters. Sometimes a salesman's success hinges upon some ego-sustaining factor, or some outside circumstance may so affect his ego that he slides from a yes attitude into a no attitude. A salesman may even assume his hearing is poor in order that he may filter the no's out of his dialogue with a prospect. With a salesman or with anyone else, a real physical handicap can be a lifelong drawback or lifelong stimulus depending upon the power of the ego, your ego and your opulence. When the ego is strong, it attracts success. When the ego falters, it can be restored by making sure that every appearance and self-image is in its favor. A man who ices to living well, but has lowered his standard of living, can restore his prosperity by first restoring the feeling of prosperity that comes with appropriate possessions and actions. Even when an appearance of prosperity is assumed for a short time, it can prove the turning point because that is what the ego needed. The ego may thus be guided by mysterious, all-pervasive powers. Look for your ego booster and you will find it. Ego is a highly individual matter. Observe the ways in which others boost their egos and you may be helped to find your own ways. Sometimes it is in the means of expressing ourselves that we best sustain our own egos, as in writing instead of speaking, or vice versa. When you find your own best way to boost your ego, you have found a great treasure.